Okay, AJP. William. Hi, William. Hi, sir. Code breaker at the ready. Hey, so should we just start talking? You ready, Paul?
Oh, hang on 1 second. Sorry.
Just 1 second.
I am so always unprepared.
Right, just so you guys know, Mr. Meenan is in charge of the actual presentation, so I can't move this. He's in charge of the presentation, pushing it through. So
basically, when it goes wrong, you know who's blaming.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we've all got backups. But
we're live, dude. You're not supposed to throw me under the bus live.
So you're in charge, mate.
Let's start swearing in a minute. Okay, all right. How do we know how everyone's in? Sorry, I know Zoom a bit, but
I don't know if everyone's in. It's a case of when we think we've got a good enough number, and right now we have got over 100 in.
Your show. Okay, right. Let's get started. Okay. Great. Sorry for us waffling on and John abusing me as he does live on this webinar. Okay, everybody, what we thought we were going to do during the summer season was try and help and assist in sharpening the old pencils in our brains for EICR coding, because every time you go on social media, lots and lots of people like to have a row over it. It's a great protagonist for just fighting and arguing and just kicking off, and people then just hating upon each other forever, which is just a total waste of energy. So what we thought we'd do is we'd just throw ourselves under the bus, have this kind of live debate with some photos and pictures. But also what I want to do is I want to maybe try and give you some additions into your thought process toolbox that an inspector should have. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go basically straight, if my computer now works, that is, we'll go into it. So little trip back in time for those who are a little bit older than the youngsters in our industry at the moment. Anyone remembers this brown book, which was one of my personal favorites? That was the 16th edition, Amendment 2. That was the last time that those codes appeared in 7671. C1, C2, C3, C4. And if we go through those codes, a C1 required urgent attention. Lots of debate on how urgent things could be, and the non-technical layman would go, well, it's urgent to you, it's not maybe urgent to me. So it kind of left quite a lot of EICRs.
It's definitely relative, isn't it? To the...
Well, yeah, it is. And the trouble is years ago we called it periodics. But the trouble is, and this is, again, this is where I kind of pull people as well, the Act itself is a periodic inspection of the installation. The output of the periodic inspection is the electrical installation condition report. The codes form part of the condition report. Whilst undertaking that, you will be using your skills, your knowledge, and everything you have in your arsenal to appropriately code the installation. Photos are a great debate tool, but they're not the be-all and end-all of it, and which what we'll try and do is change up a bit on some of that today, which maybe...
That's a very important thing to say, actually, because a photo is obviously just, it's just a visual representation of what's in front of you, but it doesn't explain the scenario, the site, the demand, the utilization. There's so much more that you need to obviously understand. When you see an image, you've got to know so much more about what's just on the image. It's
like with anything you see on the news. You can see an image which easily can be doctored and presented in a different way. And that's very much the same with coding. And it's... For us, the sharing of photos on our Instagram, for instance, is a great way of sharpening the pencil, getting the debate, looking for more information, having the desire to understand what else am I missing? What things sit outside the boundaries of that picture, the use of the installation, the application of it, the age, all these sorts of things. So C1 used to have a lot of argument. C2 required improvement. So everyone used to go, well, what's the difference between a C1 and a C2? They both need doing. Not really defined very well, and didn't get much remedial work from that as a contractor. And this is what I learnt on. C3 required further investigation, and C4, this was a really controversial one. Does not comply with BS 7671, amended to whatever the addition was, but it didn't imply the installation was unsafe. So it caused, I mean, Dave, you remember.
This one code created pages and pages and pages of reports. And the problem would be the client would then go, but is it unsafe. They go, no. Legacy says the regulations aren't less safe now that they've changed. So you get pages and pages and pages of information which the client would then not actually want much knowledge of or to use. And that's pretty much why that got flushed out. I remember, because when they changed from the periodic inspection, that was more like a timed check, whilst changing it to condition reporting is the wording is supposed to basically tell the client that actually this is more important than you probably think it is,
Indeed.
and they should take action on it.
I spent a long time arguing. I used to see so many that were C2s and C4s. And what this demonstrated was to me, when I would receive the reports or even have guys that was working with me, and I was the NICQS at the time, which was a wonderful period of my career because I was inspected back in those days. I wasn't assessed, and there was certainly a difference between an inspection and assessment, which I enjoyed because
That's a long discussion, that was.
Well, we could do a podcast just on that alone.
Yeah.
But it was trying to get the people to understand the use of the book, the just biting it off bit by bit by bit. This is why we say, if you want to learn the wiring regs, read chapter 13, fundamental principles, and then just learn it in anger when you're going along throughout the journey of, I need to understand more, I'm having a debate with someone. So that was the old codes, caused chaos. So for the younger people in the industry, that's just a little bit of history there, really. And it caused chaos. There's my little GIF man again, as always, who just likes like confused. And I've seen that look on many faces. So let's fast forward to where we are now. We're on Amendment 1. Danger present, C1. Risk of injury, immediate remedial action required. I can see it, I can touch it, it will kill me now. C2, potentially dangerous, urgent remedial action required. That to me is one failure of something, I have a big problem, which becomes C1. So I'm one step away from being a C1. C3, improvement recommended. FI, which was a new code, further investigation. Now, I'm going to be really controversial here, and I'm not going to read the comments because I'll probably go FI. I only ever want to see FI on a report where I'm time limited. This is my professional opinion, and that is all down to the extent and limitations of the inspection.
So you'd say an FI would always be a result of an operational limitation, like in time.
Yeah, and it can be something as simple. I mean, on the domestic front, you may find that you spend 2.5 hours on one lighting circuit, so you have no choice but to FI the installation. It's purely time centric. I would rather spend the time qualitatively pulling apart lighting circuit, making sure it's fault free, or I'm not giving rise to danger for that installation, and tell the customer that as you're going along. So for me, FI is more of an extension of time. I know others will look at it differently. I mean, John, what do you think? FI, you're still doing periodics every other day.
Yeah, I mean, FI, it's not something you're going to use that often, certainly on domestic stuff. And say, like you said, unless it's a time thing, because most domestic stuff is usually pretty evident as to what the problem is if there is one. So it's not something that's going to come up that often. But there are situations where that can come up. Say if you can't, get at something particularly, or there's some kind of fault that is going to take the next 10 hours to locate or something, then
I guess that's probably the biggest problem is it does, you say 10 hours. I mean, there's someone saying in chat here, would you use FI if you had a open ring final circuit? And if you're pressured for time because you're given these, maybe you've got a work process where you have to do X amount per day and you're at the board and you've got open circuit, if you're then going to go immediately FI that without having the freedom to then put an extra, it could be found in 20 minutes, it might take you an hour and a half. That's the problem. You don't know, and it all depends on your fault finding skills and maybe your immediate observational skills. But a lot of people might just go, oh no, that's a fault, but it needs to be found later, FI. And it can easily be used incorrectly there.
Just on the, I've had a quick look at the comments. Rightly so, Sean has put FI could be a further investigation required by the DNO, which is a third party, which again, you would need to discuss with the client. Now, there is a big bugbear about, immediate danger notifications where the responsibility for notifying the DNO appears to be getting advised as by the person ordering the works. But the person ordering the works, and again, guys, jump on my head, they're not competent to understand what to tell the DNO. This is where that, to me, a duty of care. So the fact that industry, and I'm going to say this, industry bodies are saying it's the responsibility of the person ordering the works, only if you give them extreme clear guidance and adequate communication of what to do and how to do it. But by the time you've done that, you're better off doing it yourself. And the only other use again of FI would be Regulation 653.2, which is covered under the extent and limitations. If the client says, I only want you to test the sockets and the earthing, that's all you're testing.
But again, there's that box where you would have the limitations agreed by the client, and the client would sign that.
Yeah, and
so
you can
that covers
FI or limit.
Yeah.
I think the point with all of these is that whatever code you're going to put down, it's not just going to be, oh, here's a code, that's the end of it. You're going to have to put it's C whatever or FI because, and then an explanation as to what actually the problem is and what further actions may or may not be needed. Because if you just stick down a code, it's pretty meaningless just on its own. So yeah, they all need context and additional information.
You've just confused the mad scientist again who doesn't understand, John. He's appeared on the screen. You've just confused him. He's just like, what is John Ward saying? I don't understand. EICRs, what's that? Right, let's move on. And I want to just very quickly brief you on this document. Now, anyone who knows who E5 are, that's our logo. We promote and we use the Statement of Ethical Principles, which is published by the Engineering Council of the UK. Now, what's that got to do with EICR? Bear with me. In the document, it says engineering professionals are professional engineers, technicians, tradespeople, you guys and girls, students, apprentices, trainees, anyone who's engaged in the activity of engineering. Engineering has such a wide breadth and depth of meaning nowadays. Non-engineers managing, teaching professionals should all be made aware. And all it does is it gives some great fundamental guidance towards honesty, integrity, respect for life, law, the environment and public good, accuracy and rigor, leadership and communication. There are videos and documents you can download. We'll put them on the YouTube video down there. So this is what everyone fears. Every single coding argument there is you'll see people, live events, they'll go, oh, well, if I don't do this bonding, will I go to prison? Will I get prosecuted? How many prosecutions has there been? If I pull the DNO fuse, will I get prosecuted? There actually was one, and they were prosecuted under the one I know of, and that was Health and Safety at Work Act Section 3. And that's because I have put a note somewhere on social media, I'll dig it out again. EDF Energy, who were the DNO at the time, the DNO equipment is theirs. So under Health and Safety at Work Act, they only authorise their employees to work on it. However, we now have some DNOs, if you're an NIC contractor, you can pull the equipment. Well, if you haven't had training on the equipment, how can you work on it safely? And that's something we're probably going to cover, Dave, in a future webinar. Yeah, I think, because I think that issue may not go to bed for some many years to come. I have been trained personally by the DNOs to work on equipment. I was very fortunate to pull fuses, reinstate. I've seen the hazards of old fuse neutrals, coffin fuses, working on the PELC, which is the paper insulated lead stuff.
Probably it's important to just mention at this point that there are obviously meter installers who have some authorization to remove, who are trained. We're not recognizing that training necessarily here, I would say.
No, it's basically minimal training to give authority to work on said equipment without understanding the principles of electricity. I know because I've done the course. I went to do the metering course and I was the only qualified electrician in the room, which quite scared me. Now, a lot of sparks I've seen online have said, oh, well, a judge will argue whether it's a C1. No, they won't. If you think for any moment in time a judge will care whether it's a C1, C2, C3 FI, no, they won't, because there's lots and lots of laws and legislation. Now, one of the big issues I see a lot of is understanding definitions, because years ago, they removed the word competent, didn't they, from the Good Workmanship and Materials Regulation, and they talked about skilled and instructed. So in 7671 currently, page 31, part 2, an instructed person is adequately supervised or supervised by a skilled person to ensure that person to perceive risks and avoid hazards which electricity can create. So even a mate or an apprentice or a labourer has to either be supervised or have sufficient knowledge to perceive the risk.
Yeah. And the key wording there, especially something a judge is going to obviously try to get evidence of, is how adequacy was determined. Yeah. What levels of competency were required, and what the if the observation and the control fundamentally was adequate. And this is, I mean, something I do a lot of training in is in trying to develop roles, responsibilities training and duty holder training for companies who run businesses, who run engineers, to understand how the law works in this area. And, you know, authorizations, roles, responsibilities. If you employ the services of an engineer, they may have some level of competency, but they may want to authorize them in certain areas. Some of you guys may have gone to certain factories, certain clients where they'll authorize you to receive permits to carry out isolation, but they may not authorize you to do live work. They may not authorize you to access their switch rooms. There are many different levels of authorization. And that's how they try to adequately advise and adequately supervise in a competent structure. The adequacy of this is probably the hardest part that they will pin down. It wouldn't be C1, C2, C3. It'll all be about this.
Indeed. And if you look at the notes, again, this is in 7671, note 2. Regulation 16 of the Electricity at Work regs requires a person to be competent. One of the reasons they took the word competent out was because it clashed. And if you think to yourself, if you're not aware, the hierarchy of legislation or laws above 7671, which is effectively guidance, is an ACOP, which is the guidance on electricity at work regs, and then the legislation electricity at work regs 1989. That defines competency to avoid danger. So anything underneath it will just be a number of methods or tools to achieve that and define what level of competence you need. Now, I know I hate this. I can't stand it. I think it's awful. I'd rather have the word competent in, to be honest with you, because this just allows a lesser trained individual.
Interpretation can be so
it's dangerous, and we all know
dangerous.
that, and this is why we're finding so much rubbish. So HSR 25 is a really good document. So instructed person, okay, we know what they are. They're someone who should have be adequately advised to perceive risk and avoid hazards. We go on to the next one. If this PowerPoint works, forgive me. Skilled person. Skilled person is someone who possesses as appropriate to the nature of the work. So if somebody says to me, Paul, please go and gland armoreds in a petrol station, immediately I go, well, I can gland an armored, but I don't understand fully the nature of what I'm doing if it's around petrol pumps. So I need to then have adequate education, training, practical skills, and I need to be able to perceive risk. Okay, now risk is a key word, okay, because everybody argues and falls out over coding, because it's in the regs. What we're going to try and do here is try and think of a bigger picture. Again, give you more tools to think outside the box. Again, it references note 2. So the word competent does actually appear in the wine regs. It appears, I think it's about 12 times. Yeah. But these are the relevant regulations that actually have the word competent. I've highlighted it. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can sit and just read. And what the word competent is very specifically worded is when people are doing initial verification or electrical inspection and testing work. You must be competent. The weirdest reg is 641.2.6, which is the second one. Verification be made by one or more skilled persons competent in such work. That to me is, well, you have the skills relevant to identify risk, but you're also very proficient in the application of understanding the risk in inspection and testing.
And again, it goes full circle, because the legislation looks for undercompetency relative to the nature of the work.
Yeah.
And so if you were to say, yes, I can carry out periodic inspections, you may have the understanding of, wiring regulations, installation practices, but you also need to understand the nature of where you are working. Because as I've said, utilization, demand, even things like, things having to be intrinsically safe may come into the inspection requirements and your competence. So this is why, again, adequacy of instruction, adequacy of authorization is what's needed for competence. And
in a lot of cases, Dave, me and you both know people aren't authorized. There isn't that level of authorization. It's only when you go into factories, plant, commercial, industrial, where there's more health and safety at work legislation that's prevalent and watched. And we have all the closed call systems. And come into domestic.
A lot of those are developed by experience.
Yeah.
By having experiences of the health and safety executive coming in to do an audit. They'll look at the control procedures and they'll look for where control is lost. When you lose control, that's where it's gone wrong, and that's what they'll look for.
And this is one of the things here is the in the domestic scenario, it's a lot more difficult because you have the instructed or skilled or competent person in the consumer's house, and that person is not socially able to perceive any form of electrical risks. So they will take the tradesman at their word, henceforth going with a registered contractor, believing that that is a level of assurance with a guarantee and a warranty and all the rest of it. But we know from experience and just seeing around the industry that that isn't always the case. And I genuinely believe it's sometimes because work is undertaken by people who are not aware of what level of competence they hold. And the industry isn't supporting them enough. So I want to kind of change this up a bit.
Yep.
So just what I do, Regulation 16, no person shall be engaged in any work activity where technical knowledge or experience is necessary to prevent danger. So if you know someone who's doing EICRs, it shouldn't be, because if they don't have technical knowledge or experience, they shouldn't be doing it. Again, that's like an instructed person. Yeah. Or where appropriate, injury, unless he possesses knowledge and experience, or is under a degree of supervision, skilled and instructed, where he may be appropriate having regard to the nature of the work. That to me gets clearer and clearer every time I read it, and also there's lots of good guidance behind it. That's the book, in case you're wondering. Now, a lot of terms, and I'm going to steal Richard's because I love him for it. He uses the SCAPE term, suitably qualified, knowledge, attitude, trained adequately, and experience. You can't have one of them. You have to have more. It means to be more cumulative of, and this is one of the things I always say to people now. If I said to people on the chat, what one word would you define as competence? And I've done this before at IET lectures, and I've gone around the room and I've asked for one word, and every single person was right. But also every single person needed to realize that it was all of those terms. It was the perception greater than the one word that made competence. It was the cumulative things: qualified, knowledge, attitude, safe working attitudes, yeah, adequately trained, adequate experience, adequate knowledge of the systems you're working on, all very prevalent. So just moving forward, I want to introduce you to a new weapon, and I shouldn't use that term, but it's a new book. It's actually not new. It's existed for years, but not many people knew it was there. It's published by the Engineering Council of the UK, and it's guidance on risk for the engineering profession. So it's actually prevalent for electricians. Now, it has within it 6 themes, 6 principles, which require you to apply professional responsible judgment, take a leadership role. Well, an EICR inspector would apply professional responsible judgment. It asks you to adopt a systematic and holistic approach to risk identification, assessment and management. Well, an EICR inspector must identify risk and assess it and code it and manage it accordingly by the issuing of a document or possible danger notification.
Can I just intercept 1 second?
Please do.
Paul in chat is struggling to see the slides. Can everyone else see the slides okay? Because it might be that just Paul, if it's just right, yes. Right, Paul, just maybe restart Zoom, buddy. Okay, not you, Paul. Paul in chat, Paul. All right, not you, Paul, me and Paul, because that would be a real ball like if you did that. Yeah. Okay, sorry, crack on, mate. He's having trouble seeing the slides.
Apologies. Okay, I went with the black background so it doesn't hurt your eyes. Okay, so this is the interesting one. Comply with legislation and codes. Code of Practice 7671, but be prepared to seek further improvements. So this is why we have always said work from the regulations. Why? Because the Engineering Council of the UK, which talks directly to the Privy Council of Government, is telling us and recommending to us that we seek further improvements in complying with legislation and codes. I've never been satisfied with just working to the regs.
But do you think this electrical industry does the other half of this? Does it actually, prepare to seek further improvement? Does it give us motivation? Does it give us the right support?
No, well, let's be honest about it. I've been in this industry nearly 25 years, and this industry has never introduced this document to me. Which is why the minute I read it, I just went, that's relevant to a Spark, that's relevant to a Spark. Now, just to be clear, some parts of this document will be relevant to design engineers, professionally registered chartered engineers, etc. But the content of this, you could print this out in a domestic home and use this to inform your clients as to why you do what you do, why you're giving a professional service, because this is some of the governance and guidance that the Engineering Council mandate on you, because I don't think any industry bodies publish this sort of stuff. Ensure good communications with others involved. Yeah, good communication will be your report and how clear it is. Ensure lasting systems for oversight and scrutiny. That's more business stuff, but contribute to public awareness of risk. The industry at the moment is screaming about EICRs. because of one, the condition of certain installations, and this new legislation, which is encouraging the drive-by £38, £80 token gesture rubbish.
It was already a smouldering fire, but the legislation is just flaming it because
it's just throwing fuel on
it. They want to legislate something that was already broken as a system, and it's just going to drive more of a broken system.
So just very quickly, I'm going to skim through these. You can pause these if you're watching on YouTube. Apply professional and responsible judgment taken. Engineers should demonstrate by example a commitment to safety, reliability, and ethical conduct, hence the statement of ethical principles. Through professional management of risk from inception of any project, that can include EICRs. Engineers at all levels should clearly demonstrate the standards which they expect risk to be managed, 7671 in this case, thus setting an example. Engineers should be prepared to challenge assumptions and proposals. That's kind of what we're trying to do with these. Ensure that safety receives appropriate consideration. Assess the balance of risk and reward. That could be the cost of doing it against the level of time needed to be required to complete the work. Strive for all those involved to be able to identify potential problems and opportunities. Ensure the engineer reporting to them has the opportunity to maintain competence in the area of risk. How many electricians working for these periodic inspection companies are told how to assess risk? How many of them are sat down and told, can we do a risk assessment training course today?
Many of them have the RAMs done for them by the office.
Generic RAMs, I do not agree with generic RAMs because it creates a culture of cut, paste, and then we don't know how to do it ourselves. And then lead others in improving practice. So what we're trying to do is by highlighting this to you guys and girls, you can improve your own practices and use this. So you can download this afterwards and absorb. Number two, adopt a systematic and holistic approach to risk identification, assessment and management. This is EICRs to a T. Yeah, the factors that give rise to risk are interdependent and cannot be examined in isolation. It is vital in managing risk to be aware of this interdependency rather than dealing with risks on one by one as they arise. Use approaches that deal with the whole systems. So look beyond technical considerations to address non-technical factors, human, organizational, cultural perception. What about use of installation? You know, is there a different risk factor in a nursery where small children are, a hospital? You know, how do we gauge and perceive that? Make risk assessments and management an integral part of engineering activity and decision making. Using of RAMs dumbs that down. And I'm talking about generic RAMs. Adopt a conservative decision making approach that is proportionate to risk. So I'm not going to go in and do an EICR and say, oh, it's going to cost you 12 grand. The famous one, the plastic board, or C2, C1, got to get it changed straight away.
Well, so many people are still looking at this as an industry to go in cheap and get remedials.
Yes.
So much of it is about creating remedials. And that, again, is against this ethic here.
Aim to quantify the risks with as much precision as is relevant, sufficient and can be supported by evidence. When I get an EICR document given to me, I want evidence, so I throw it in the bin. I want justification, I want evidence. This is why I generally say good practice is, if you're issuing a report now, use something like Site Pro and get it all photographed so you can code it as well and give it to the report. I wish to God, to be honest with you, half these reporting softwares did that now.
Yeah, good. I mean, key thing there is timestamping your photos, timestamping your evidence.
Timestamping is key,
yeah.
Especially if you have to go back and your work is warranted in a domestic world. I've spoken to too many Sparks in domestics where they will do a piece of work, they go back 18 months later because they've done a 5-year materials guarantee, they turn up and somebody's done something, but they can't prove it because they can't find the photos on the phone. So it's very much worthwhile. Aim to quantify risk with as much precision as is relevant, sufficient and can be supported. Be responsive to change in the operating environment. Look for connections, patterns and relationships between risk and opportunity. Consider the role of ergonomics. Bear in mind risk assessment should be used as an aid to professional judgment and not a substitute. That's a controversial statement.
Yeah.
Don't rely on a risk assessment. Use your professional judgment. This is why we're talking about this. Be aware that developing an over-elaborate procedure can lead to poor compliance and undermine wider safety culture. So then number 3, if we just skip that top line, regulations and codes are generic. They can only deal with anticipated events and not predict every possible situation. This is one of the things that we have all the time when people row over codes. It's not worth rowing. Engineers should take a measured yet challenged approach to potential risks, whether or not regulations apply. Engineers should act in accordance with codes of conduct if we know they exist and we wish to comply with them. Hopefully we would. Know about and comply with law in countries where they're operating and where their products will be used. recognize and understand the intent behind the standards and codes, and understand when their limits are being approached, comply with relevant legal requirements, seek advice, where it's reasonably practicable, seek further improvements, embedding a culture of continuous improvement, be open-minded, and avoid hiding behind regulations.
I love that. I love that last
Great.
one.
It's
I love
great.
that one.
You can see why we're talking about this now, because nobody else in the industry will talk about this document.
No.
Moving on very quickly, good communication of others. I think that's evident. Strong, established, honest two-way communication, including with your clients and homeowners. Consultation and feedback process about risk. I do wish more people would ring up the DNOs. When I used to ring up the DNO to report something, I did not give them an option. I threw my proverbial toys out the goddamn pram. Anything I needed to do to get them there, I got them there. And I'm not going to lie about that. I genuinely did. I would literally tell them anything to get them immediately screeching down the road. Right, go and fix what you should be maintaining anyway.
It's the same for clients as well. Your consultation with the clients, getting the clients to actually understand risk.
Yeah, well, risk and benefit.
Because they may have the attitude of, is it a pass or a fail? But, you know, that's not really what you need to do.
The more knowledge we have, the better we can express, as it says there, the balance of risk and benefit. Well, you don't have to change your board, but the benefit is this, enhanced protection. Do you know what I mean? Which we now have the ability to sell to the consumer in the form of surge and arc fault detection. Encourage open reporting approach, spirit of questioning and learning from others. Hopefully we do that, although we do get shot and kicked for it many a time. Avoid a good news only or closed culture. I don't think that's us. I think we will talk about all the parts of the culture. Ensure the lasting systems for oversight. Well, this is just about oversight and scrutiny. This is more about businesses and roles and responsibilities. I'm going to skip through that one. This is the important one. Contribute to public awareness of risk. The perception of risk amongst the public is influenced by a range of factors, including emotional ones. Engineers have an important role in raising awareness. We have to be prepared to engage in public debate, because at the end of the day, how many people have rung up Spark and gone, oh, my other Spark told me you're full of do you know what I mean? You've just conned me. You've done this. Ensure discussion of the public includes risk and its management and other factors. Ensure the concept of risk and reward is communicated. Recognize social, political, and economic implications, and then explain quantitative aspects of risk and be honest and clear. Now, there is one other line in this which I haven't put on the screen, and it says society's perception of risk may differ from the engineers, and therefore engineers should strive for clarity when communicating about risk and communicate in terms understandable by non-specialists. These are some of the areas where the conflict exists. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Well, how many times has Ryan said about the forms that are filled with technical jargon, which doesn't communicate the risk to the actual recipient of that document? You know, you can't write in, you know, obviously you can't write it's bad, it's dangerous. You can't just go in too plain in English, but you've got to actually translate it.
I'll tell a story, very quick one. I had a phone call from a guy who was doing an EICR, and he rang me up and he said, I've just finished the EICR. I went, great. And he went, it's all fucked. Excuse my language. And I went, okay, can you put it in like the terms of definition and codes? And he went, yeah, I'm up to 50. It's all fucked. And I literally had to go out and meet him. And the minute I saw him, the first words I said was, yeah, okay, that's all fucked. We need to change it. But interesting, when I was talking to him, he couldn't string he couldn't put the pieces together to make the jigsaw and put the case together to say, this is why you need to change that system or that consuming it or that distribution panel, which was worrying, but it wasn't, because together we worked together to.
I've had a few Sparks ask me to kind of help them they want to sometimes overdo the technical jargon.
Yeah.
And so they want to write it very technically. So I'll say, well, this is how you write it technically, but now let's come backwards. Let's translate it technically to then make it simple. And it's just something that you develop with experience.
Oh, smashed the place up. Sorry. Right, now we're going to get on to the fun bits. So what we're going to do on this one is we're just going to code it. Hopefully you've all had enough time to look at it. This is the only one that we are actually. Oh, I think I broke my computer.
You broke your computer?
I think I actually have broke my.
Well, I'm just going to scan through the chat through that piece that you just done. Oh, okay. There's Jack going up there. So we talked about photos, and so some of the guys saying I certify vestibular electroform and the NICIC as well. We think David says you can also do that as well. That's adding
Yeah, that's really
photos.
good.
That's adding photos, but also get on the photo a little timestamp.
Yeah.
Just a little dated timestamp on the photo itself. Just so that, you know, it's got that little traceability there.
Okay. So what we're going to do on this one, we're going to code this one. The rest of them, I'm going to leave the codes on the screen, because everyone may agree, may disagree. Maybe we can take the debate outside of the photo. I think the question is on these photos, there may not be any individual is not wrong, but what we need to do is have that collective debate as to our engineering logic and our perception of risk. EICRs to me is a perception of risk. Yeah, risk is the identification of obviously hazards, as you can see from that photo. So what we got there, lads, we've got an old, looks like an old...
A pre-SMK.
Yeah, it looks like an old MK one, doesn't it? The old 3871 breakers. Yeah. Someone's obviously done a very dodgy modification where looks like they've extended the cables to run something. You've got the CPC with a connector block. You've got an innovation of a 1 penny piece used to kind of act like a lug in some form to keep a stranded cable compressed against the buzz bar so they could nick a supply from obviously a board that was full. So you're the inspector, you've gone in, you've checked your bonding, because any inspector doing EICR should be checking the bonding first before doing anything else. Why? Because it's good practice. Because if your earthing or other suitable precaution isn't there, why would you carry on? In the day, you're interfering with an installation where you could give rise to danger. And
anything you do can make that existing situation less safe, and your work should never create a less safe scenario.
Yep, I've stopped. I've made it a point of principle where any EICR I've done or my subbies do, if there isn't sufficient earthing and bonding, they stop immediately. Period. So what do? You walk in, you see that. What code do you put for that? What do you think, JW?
That one, I put C2.
Why?
Because it's not an approved connection method, and someone's put in the chat that copper coins conduct really well. Well, copper coins aren't actually made of solid copper, so conductivity is a question in that one. So
what you've just done, John, you've just given us your 2 pence on that.
That's right.
Hey,
well
I'm here all night.
Yeah,
I'm here all night. Sorry, these jokes are awful. Yeah, no, I agree. You could, definitely connection methods incorrect, not in line with manufacturer's assembly.
There's many things that would come up with a C2. What would be happening for you to elevate that to a C1?
Well, for me,
maybe
definitely signs of thermal damage, loose connections, damage to the buzz bar, any cracks or visible cracks or splits in the copper or conductor material, thermal damage to the breakers above, black or soot deposits. To be honest with you, it's a C2. Even if those weren't there, that earth with the connector block extending on it, anything to do with earthing, I see to it straight away. If it's prevalent for safety, it goes as a C2 with me, and that's, some people may argue with it, but again, I don't work to the regulations or even to the code breaker book. I work from it all. This is just informed guidance and my own engineering judgment.
The other thing with this is that what's the overload protection for those 2 wires? Because that's coming direct off the bus bar.
What overload protection, John?
Exactly. So,
So that's
we can tell everybody this is actually John Ward's consumer unit at his house. So it's taken last. No, it's not. It's not. It's Dave's. No. So what's everyone saying on the chat?
Majority are pushing C2 through. David says C2, but C1 if euros are used.
Just totally agree there. If it's a euro, it's a C1.
Yeah,
absolutely, completely agree.
And he says if there's thermal effects, C1. So that I kind of play this devil's advocate in my mind when I look at coding. I go, okay, if I'm thinking it's a C2, what would I have to see to go to C1? What would I have to not see for it to be a C3? Just so that I can kind of understand where I've come to my position.
So okay, let's change this up a little bit. Let's say that's in a consumer unit in a nursery. Okay, so what advice would you then give to the owners of the nursery compared to, say, a domestic homeowner who has said, but I've lived here for 20 years, it works fine. Thank you very much for your interference. Because this is the one-man domestic guy here trying to avail an opportunity, use his risk management knowledge to prevent people getting killed or a house burning down.
I mean, both of them result in C2, which result in unsatisfactory observations. So fundamentally, the outcome is the same. Homeowners, if they say that it's been there for years and stuff, then you keep it simple. If you've got nurseries and things, so you just have to, let them understand the consequence of this risk, what would happen if they don't take action. Give a bit more information on that.
So with customers or people saying, "Oh, it's worked for years, I don't need to change it," that comes up all the time.
All the time.
Yeah,
and you just have to explain to them that it might have worked for years, but there's a big difference between something working and something actually being safe. So something working is on its own doesn't really tell you a whole lot. And
it's like the argument for surge protection, where people say, "I'm not having £100 surge protection device protecting my home," but yet the iPhone 11 Max Pro is £1,600.
Yeah,
they'll pay for that, but they won't pay for a device that can protect all of their electronics. And trust me, I think a lot more electronics are going to be appearing in houses, and a lot more protection is going to be required.
Kirsty has that wonderful slide that she uses, which has
the statistics one.
Yeah, someone provided them with that, where it shows you technology we used 10, 15 years ago, technology we use today. Everybody needs a new TV every 6 or 7 years, so everyone's got a new smarter TV. And a lot of these newer toys now are much more susceptible than they used to be. So it's not a question of, I've never needed it before. It's you've basically, over the past 10, 20 years, you naturally have evolved your technology by buying a new thing.
I think this is the debate here. So I'm gonna reveal what we've kind of. This is the only one that will actually, if it works, if my computer works, that is. Hopefully this works. So
there we go.
We've kind of, on an initial assessment, gauged it as a C2. However, some bloke called Phil Watts, don't know who he is, but he says C1, and a number of other people, Paul Jarman, Alan Wilson, and a few other guys, they say C1. And do you know what? Dependent on the installation, I don't know if I could probably walk away from that. I would most certainly be issuing a danger notification form.
Just realised that Phil Watts is in chat. Hi. Hi, Dad. All right.
Yeah. Oh, is he?
Tell me who.
Yeah, Phil Watts.
Unless it's another Phil Watts.
Yeah, there may be. You never know. But there is, guys and girls, absolutely, the minute you see that, that's either a danger notification form with a very clear explanation, or it's quoting for a change, because it's not really good enough to leave that there. So I wouldn't argue with a C1.
Yeah, Phil's added, the reason is his personal assessment, C1, is the immediate remedial action. The C2 doesn't require the immediate remedial, and that's why he pushes it to C1, because it pushes him to get rid of the freaking penny washers. And that's why he's thinking C1, which I can't disagree with.
Yeah, because again, if we look at the definitions again of, C2 is potentially dangerous, urgent remedial action required. Okay, so there's no definition or guidance on what the remedial action, or what a timeline you put to urgent remedial action is. In C1, it's immediate remedial action required, and my brain would want to fix that there and then, which would ruin my day.
And that's why Phil's used to C1, and I get that.
But then again, the pragmatic approach to the domestic installer is he may have jobs booked in. Okay, he has to a certain extent, yes, be passionate and caring and involved, but he can't sit and, trust me, when I was on the tools doing domestic, I genuinely would leave people's houses at like 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Okay,
because I wanted them to be protected.
All right, so let's say that you're in someone's house, you've seen this, and you're going, I'm going to go C2, and you're going to put the lid back on, and you're going to leave it like that. So you're leaving that in service.
Yes.
Do you think that's okay with the ethical standards that we've been reading so far?
I would, to be honest with you, before I put the lid back on, I'd get the homeowners, and even if I had to wait for them to come home and explain to whoever the owner of the house was, or get the landlord down and say, listen, this really needs fixing now. This is just a ticking time fire, basically waiting to happen. And effectively, I would only put the lid back on if I was coming back to do the board change, to be perfectly frank. I would definitely issue a danger notification. But the fact of the matter is if you go purist on it, again, just on that photo, there's no signs of thermal damage. Nope. If I check it for tightness and it's tight, it's completely wrong in every way, shape or form. It's a C2 with a danger notification.
It might be that feeds a bit of equipment that's not actually used a lot or isn't used a lot. So there are some things you can do to engineer your judgment.
Yes. Well, let me get this, the perception of risk, isn't it?
That's the fun of this, I guess.
If I see that picture there, there is a risk of immediate danger to the homeowner, I go straight to C1. Yeah. If I see that that is a dog shit, excuse my language, dog shit lash up, that just the person who did it just needs to be banned from the industry. If I see that, then immediately it's potential dangerous. It needs to be remedied. But if I'm not paid by the customer to do it, then the only thing I can do is discharge my legal duty of care as a skilled, competent person and hope that I keep records to argue in case the judge asks me why I didn't do it.
Does your coding opinion change if this is a private tenant or a rented property?
Doesn't change at all. The only thing that would make
the same thing if you're in a property that's going to be rented and you know that it might take up to 28 days for this to be remedied.
I don't generally factor in how the property is owned or rented. I'll be honest with you, the one thing that always factors in for me for domestic always was families, young families, young children, lone mothers, stuff like that, pull at the heartstrings.
The amount of times I would look around.
Persons.
The amount of times I'd be at a fuse box and I'd be thinking, okay, risk, and I'd be looking for the little kids' shoes or the little coats, you know, and that would just help me understand the building better and the element of risk, especially when the fuse board was underneath the where the books were. Yeah.
Let's do a poll. Let's start plowing through these now.
All right,
John,
just briefly
explain it and run a poll.
What do we see?
It's crap in it, really.
Right, I'm gonna launch a poll.
Yeah,
for you all to do it. But if this covers your screen up, then because some of you guys might be on phones, and I won't keep up for too long. I'll just do it for a couple of seconds, really.
So yeah, this is John. Do you want? Is this one of yours, John?
No, it's not one of mine.
Right. Okay. So this is one I got. Oh, hang on. There's something's appeared in front of my screen. So
the coding poll.
Yeah. So basically, that was one that was sent in. I think that's on our Instagram. This is the general find daily of a domestic installer when they're crawling through a loft. Somebody wants, and let's be honest about it, in the 90s, again, my personal opinion, forgive me, in the 90s, the industry went mad with these sodding halogen downlighters. And they were a curse, but they were also a great money earner. And it's fair to say a lot of manufacturers didn't really manufacture their luminaires where you could loop a 3-plate wiring system in very well. So then became the
they still haven't really. It's relied on
sales of 20 amp lighting junction boxes.
Yeah.
And guys were ended up just using any form of junction box. And as you can see there, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cables at least going into there. So
that's the problem. I think they had like 5 terminals, didn't they? They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
20 amp junction boxes. I've still got some in the shed.
When you have two-way switching, you run out of space. Your CPCs take an exit, don't they?
Yeah, and I somewhere I think in some of the other slideshows I've probably got better ones where people have craftily twisted them around the lid and done all sorts of fancy stuff. But this is the stuff you're crawling through a loft and you immediately think it's the middle of summer. Oh man, this is a nightmare. So what's everybody coding it as? I can't code it because
I said it's the analysts can't code.
That's
we
fine,
have got 1C1, 69 C2s, and 17 C3s. 2 FIs so far. So I'll end the poll. I'll end the poll, and we'll just look at. Then I can then share the result.
C2, C3s, FI. I like the use of FI because the persons who have used FI have gone, this is going to be a headache of a lighting circuit. How big is this problem? And yeah, I'm also, by the way, I don't know if I'm the only person who, I actually use more than one code for certain things. So I might C3FI a lot of stuff just because of time restraints and what I've seen is bad. So I need to use the coding as best to explain.
Well, that's why you have those lovely codes with the observations. You can just put the codes that you need to with the observations. This is, yeah, I mean, when you see something like this in a loft space, the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously assess the risk here, but then you're going to want to look further at the connections to the luminaires themselves to see if there's another connector, a taped connector box floating or another joint or something.
Okay, so let's debate the issue then. So 70% have said, 78% have said C2. Okay, C2, potentially dangerous, urgent remedial action required. So,
what's the potential danger then?
Yeah. What is the potential? So, I would argue terminations straight away. The fact that the terminations aren't secure because now they will be secure inside the junction box via the brass screws, but the actual unit, as you can see from that, is just floating.
Well, yeah. So these joint boxes have holes underneath them for fixing. The manufacturers specify they shall be fixed, and the cables going into them shall be mechanically sound clipped and all that. They shouldn't float. They shouldn't wave in the air.
Indeed. So straight away, I could look at extant section 522, selection and erection of wiring systems, external influences, impact. You know, I could be crawling along the insulation.
526 is connections, and in there you'll find about the need for the cables to have mechanical and electrical continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that it could be covered in loft insulation, derating of the insulation.
I've known a few though to say, but this is in the loft space, so that it's actually there's, because you've got single insulation there, you don't have the sheathing. Is a loft space an enclosure? Because some people do think that they think it's not readily accessible.
Well,
it's in a loft space.
It depends on the person accessing it, isn't it? And
in a domestic, in particular, where the person's going up there are not authorised or skilled persons, they're homeowners.
No, they're not. They're not skilled. And when you're selecting and erecting an installation, look at Appendix 5. The use is the installation under the control of a skilled person who has sufficient skills and knowledge to understand that a single sheathed conductor could give rise to danger through degradation and damage. The fact of the matter is that was covered in insulation. So you immediately have a thermal issue where you can derate the current carrying capacity of the conductor. You've then got section 526, which is your electrical connections, because they're not installed in line with any manufacturer's instructions of that joint box. You've then got the fact that you've got a risk of a rise in impedance or a loose connection of a CPC, which is a requirement for safety. So I'm going to go with the C2s.
So if you've observed that this has thermal insulation on top of it,
yeah,
do you just remove the thermal insulation and then potentially impact the house's energy performance categories? Or do you then go, oh, I'll have to FI this and then actually calculate the impact of that thermal insulation if that value of duration is not there for you in the calculations?
I have found when I've had to crawl through lofts doing these, I will always uncover the insulation from electrical connections, and I would rather leave it there and allow it to the heat to dissipate. And I will just tell the customer that I've left the insulation exposed with the C2 recommendations. Would they like me to come back and do it? Would they like me to do it now? Most times it won't be now.
It's worth remembering, obviously we comply with BS 7671 on this, but if you go to the building regulations and you go to energy performance, there is a bit that says about spacing being needed for luminaires. So you can always kind of just point people to that if they moan about it. But I would agree. I remember actually putting... I would put spaces over. I was doing some work in a bungalow, and all of these non-fire rated downlights. It was a bungalow, so I wasn't going to upgrade to fire rated because there wasn't a habitable space above. But the insulation was right over the top of them, and it was cooking them. So we got some soil pipe, and we just cut that down. We just made little tubes, so little vents to go into the thermal insulation, just to kind of vent it up. We had to create these little things, these little.
Indeed. Right. Should we move on to the next one? Is there any more comments or?
The majority of a couple of people are talking about obviously mechanical strain, and the CPC is not sheathed at all in some parts where they go into these junction boxes. Sometimes they see that there's no sheathing at all in the CPC.
I definitely think it's a C2 of an FI on this.
I think I can understand why some people would say if it's in a void space in a building that's non-domestic that they might think about authorization access, less risk. In domestic, though, we'd have to C2 this, I think.
Right. Okay. What we're going to do now
FI as well
is we are going to speed these up because we're going to pretend we're on a drive-by now.
Yeah. I'm going to stop sharing the result on that one.
Right. Next one.
Is this any of ours? Whose is this? Do we just? Well. Sorry.
This wasn't one of John's, I don't think. I think this was sent on an Instagram. Again, this is the Revenge of the Plumber.
Yeah.
That's one of the lads sent that to me. Head under a floorboard. You can see where the plumber's obviously done his joints on his copper pipe. Pretty much melted the sheath. I think that was a shower circuit, if I remember rightly. You can also see that it looks like pitch as well, which is leaking from above it.
I'd be interested to see what's above that.
Yeah, I never got the photo above. It was look what we found underneath. But again, it's one of the common problems that Spark have. It's just rubbish, really, to be honest with you. It's just lazy, sloppy plumbers. Yeah, what do you guys think?
We're seeing a lot of C1s. Let's run the poll just to see if anyone actually wants to creep in a different opinion.
Yeah, we're gonna try and speed these guys. So vote quickly, vote with your head. Pretend you're on site and you've got a hell of a lot of work to do. Pretend we're making you do 4 a day.
Yeah,
come on.
I mean, we've obviously got the impact here of a problem, but what we've got is the absence of the regulation where it says about prevention of mutual detrimental influences here, where we've clearly got one tradie not working well with the other.
It's interesting we're getting a lot of C1s.
I think that's because they're looking at there's clearly damage to that cable on the left. Obviously, the heating scorching there is evident of the sweating work by the plumber, we assume.
Yeah, well, it's damaged the external sheath, and you can kind of almost see the colouring of what will look like the neutral through where it's melted, but I can't see any exposed copper on that cable. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate here while you guys are doing your thing. I can't see exposed copper, and that would be a C1 danger present. Definitely it's a potentially dangerous urgent remedial action because the cable's been subjected to thermal issues. It needs ripping out, it needs rewiring and replacing. But is there an immediate danger given the fact it's placed out of reach?
Right, so it's out of reach, it's not accessible, so if there is any damaged insulation there, they're not readily exposed and live. Would there be any need to do any further tests or inspections to actually understand this risk more? Or visually, is that adequate, do you think?
I think, to me, that's as a minimum, it's a C2 with an FI to verify the integrity of the circuit. Again, I'm just curious. This is based on me sticking my head under a floorboard and seeing that visually. The cable is damaged. I can't see exposed copper from what I can see. The circuit may have had its integrity impeded, which is fine. Well, it isn't fine. So I need to do further investigation. Without a doubt. So for me, I would C2FI that. I know everyone's going to hate me for saying that, but it's purely based on that. I wouldn't begrudge anyone C1 in it, but I would be saying, where's the danger present, the immediate risk of injury, or the need for immediate remedial action.
I immediately want to get closer to that cable to see if there is exposed conductor, and I want to test that because obviously inspection and testing, so it might be that I haven't tested this yet, and it might be under an IR test I can actually confirm that there is damage to this cable. But again, that cable might not be damaged so much that the testing would find that problem. So this kind of inspection just increases the need for us to take inspection seriously.
Yeah, and I agree with Sean. The pitch leaking is a separate issue. Pitch generally leaks slowly over time, to be honest with you, so it's never generally boiling hot when it touches the cable. It's something that just slowly slithers down, but I think we'll cover that in our DNO webinar.
In our DNO,
In our DNO webinar. Right, so I'm going to C2FI or C1FI it. That's what I would do.
We've got 85% C1s.
Wow, okay.
So I think what's happening there is a lot of people just seeing the drama. And I think that's also having that impact, that the drama of what's gone on obviously escalates it into C1 territory, which is justifiable. Is it immediate dangerous though? You'd have to have some.
The fact of the matter is the remedial is I would, as an inspector, I would probably find that circuit and I would put a mega across it as a minimum before I left, just to see whether it is. And if I've got low insulation readings, then I'll jump that C2 to an C1. And say, okay,
right. So your your CTFI, but your FI might result in readings that go from C2 up to C1.
Yes, absolutely. And I wouldn't begrudge anyone who did a C1/FI as well, to be perfectly frank, because again, the engineering judgment, the perception of risk is within the individual and their knowledge and experience at the end of the day. And so I wouldn't argue the toss. What I would say is just remember C1 is danger is present, immediate risk of injury, immediate remedial action required. So if it's out of reach of uninstructed persons, then you could have somebody from an industry body say, well, it's actually a C2. But so just be wary. But again, it's the risk is in the eye of the beholder. Just moving on to the next one. Look at this dog's dinner. That was actually found. So excuse me, for anyone who's not aware, there's an old meter on the top. I think it was an old ABB one or Sangamo one. And the thing next to it is the old time clocks, which used to take their feed off of the meter and then switch out a little contact in the meter and give you 2-rate systems. That's how that was found.
I just want to respond to a comment.
Yeah.
Paul has said here, if you're using the software, to report electronically, could you actually give 2 codes? That's down to the. I mean, you should be able to use them.
I would hope so.
But if you can't, that's the example where software restricts what you can do. It's one of the reasons why I don't like many softwares, because they do try to, auto-complete, and they do try to lead you on. You should have the freedom to do the reporting the way you want to. If your software restricts your reporting ability, you've got to choose a different software.
Well, it's limiting your assessment and application of engineering judgment. Yeah,
this is where we hear names like Electroform, because Electroform always appear to be listening to what electricians are talking about and trying to adjust and modify their software. So try other softwares to see if it gives you the freedom that you want.
Yeah, I like Electroform. To be honest with you, I've talked to him about a lot of things and he does it. Right, that's a C1 every day of the week. I think that's fairly evident.
Is this how it was?
Yeah,
found.
That was found. This wasn't an inspector who turned up and took covers off. This is how it was found, and this was in it was in the back of a house in like what was a converted old like toilet block where someone had just battened it in. There was evidently a new supply put in there at some point, and this was the lash up that the builder had done.
Right.
So this was not an electrician who did it. This was a builder who'd done it. And I believe they'd moved the fuse board to somewhere nice, and they also ran a supply out to a shed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a C1. It's just a mess, really, isn't it? It just needs to be sorted. But does everyone agree? Typical builders, yes.
It's pretty much nice.
Sadly, the balance of risk and future work is I find the best way of working with builders is to educate them. Educate them in the realms of you can make more money. But you must listen to me, help me, take me on that journey with you.
So, sorry, I didn't catch it. This scenario, was this immediately readily accessible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is how the guy found it.
Yeah, it's a C1 then. If it's
it's a C1 every day of the week.
For me, it is.
It's a quick win. To be honest with you, C1 due to evidence.
Okay, let's end that one and share that one.
Right, C1, 98% of you bang on.
That's fairly firm on that one.
I agree with the C3s as well, by the way, and the C2s, because it's just crap and it needs improving. Again, this is where
problems there. So yeah, it's C1. You got C2 for the armor's not connected, and all the codes basically. So
there are many observations in one picture. There.
So maybe people can watching it as a practice method, see how many codes you can pull out of this. How many regulations does this one picture give you? It's a good way of writing up your reports. When do you stop? Right, moving on. If this computer works, I don't know why my computer is acting incredibly slow. I think this is one of John's. Is this one of yours, John?
No, it's not.
Oh, fucking
I don't know where you got it from.
Sorry, I've got thousands and thousands of. I asked for photos on social media, and I just got overwhelmed. So I now have just mass catalogs of it. So this is a classic.
All right, the cover is off on this one, yeah?
The cover is off, by the way. It wasn't found like that. The cover is off. So this is one of the classic Wilexes that John Ward owns. It's a vulcanized Indian rubber supply.
Wooden
for
frame.
those who may not have seen that, which is just the tails there on the main switch. It's a double pole isolator. And this used to be full of rewirable 3036s. And then Wilex, in their wisdom, came up with the 3871 push fit, and it's being upgraded with the 60898 trip switch equivalents with the 3KA rating. How would you go about coding that?
Well, is it immediately dangerous?
Oh, no.
What's the condition of the VIR below the board? That's a thing that I want to see.
No, I think most people would. Again, I'm gonna just dive in here. Really, I think C3 is the default. Everybody, the minute you see it and you see VIR, you're just thinking straight away C3. But then when you start looking at it and you think about
got to look at its condition,
circuits. Do I touch VIR because it can fall apart? Is it flaking? Your brain works from a C3 FI into a C2 FI, and depending on your extent and limitations, you may actually turn around and say, well, this could potentially be a C1 because you can see some idiots twisted all the CPCs together. What happens if you untwist them and they all break? You don't have any earth continuity. It may be that that installation is life expired.
Well, that's a good point, because obviously that twisted protective conductors there they're going to be, that compromises your ability to inspect it. And if the electrical installation is compromising your ability to properly inspect it and maintain it, it must be considered as life expired at that point if you can't maintain it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go for a C2, and quite honestly, if once I went in before, found that, then I'd be telling the customer there's not going to be a whole lot of point in inspection the rest of this installation, because if you start taking light switches off and you've got that kind of wiring behind, just taking the switch off is going to cause that insulation to fall off and degrade and fall to bits. So this is definitely one where continuing with an inspection on this is probably not worth it, because you're going to cause more problems just by actually, say, taking a socket off and having a look behind. So
John, what you've successfully done is you've done one of your 4-a-day EICRs in about a minute. Congratulations.
Well done.
It's possible.
It's got to do a certificate yet, though.
Yes, indeed. Just looking at the main switch, if you look at the line conductor there, or the live, as we called it, you can see the fabric of the VIR is coming off. I personally, when I opened that up, I would immediately sit under the cupboard and just put my head down and go, oh, for flip's sake, have a look round, have a nosy, maybe get a ZS reading, and just go, do you know what? It is absolutely pointless going with this. So I personally would see to it with an FI, and just say rewire required. To be honest with you, I wouldn't waste the energy or any more money and just bill them for a couple of hours and move on.
Right. So with that,
not worth it.
Okay, so you've made an initial observation. You've
Yep.
made an initial observation that the switch gear is life expired.
Yes, but also the cabling is potentially life expired, because I can see that the cabling is flaking and flaying. I don't want to bring rise of danger to that installation by interfering or touching it.
Yeah. So you at that point are going to put a C2 in.
Yeah.
Which is not immediate remedy, but is still unsatisfactory.
Yes.
And you're going to stop doing your inspection at that point.
Yeah.
All right. So you're going to have to then at that point detail specifically what you have inspected, because it could be that there is a hidden danger in this system, a C1, a potential fatality, which you're now not going to see because you've chosen to stop.
Yeah, but
so if you do that, you need to make sure you document clearly why you stopped and where you stopped.
And again, it comes down to extent limit. I mean, if I was in this more than likely is a pensioner's home at the end of the day, because I've been in loads of old people's homes where they've still got lead twin, etc., etc. But you are right. I mean, I could at that board, I could do a ZS, PFC, PSCC. I can check the earthing, presence of equipotential bonding. What else can I do? I could switch the main switch off. I could maybe put an insulation resistance across the board to see whether I do actually have any insulation resistance values, to gauge the condition, to see whether it's worth doing anything else. But as a general rule of thumb, having just dealt with a recent VIR installation that pretty much fell apart, I personally wouldn't touch it, because I don't want to take responsibility for the alteration and addition. And that's the trouble. The minute I touch it, I could be deemed as altering it, and I don't want that. So for me, it's a C2 with an FI. And I mean, I could offer, look, I'll visually check sockets and lights and stuff like that for direct access, but it would still be an unsatisfactory. I could walk around and say, look, yeah, your lights work, your switches are all in good, there's no cracks, there's no signs of thermal damage, but your board, the wiring is 60, 70 years old, there's signs of degradation on the cabling, your insulation values are low, you haven't got equipotential bonding, it's a failure. I recommend a full bonding scheme and a rewire of a new consumer unit. I don't think it would be.
You're right. I mean, old homes. Other places I also see this, not this board particularly, but similar, would be landlord communal systems, where the flats are often upgraded, but sometimes the landlord communal part does get sometimes left behind, and I see that sometimes.
Right. So I'm going to C2. What did everybody else come up with? C2.
We've got a C2, 67%. We've got 3% C1, 13% C3.
Right.
So,
there we go.
And 17% FI. That's a good FI one. That one.
Okay. John, this is definitely one of yours.
No, it's not.
It is. I'm sure you sent me this one. This is going to become a repeat thing, isn't it? Right. This is John Ward's work. No, so this is an installation where, well, from what it looks like, is someone who spurred off a socket which is sideways, to add another socket, and then they've spurred off of that. So where would you start with this? How would you look at this as far as a codable observation? Lack of mechanical protection on the cabling, possible strain on the conductors in the back.
Well, yeah, the method isn't technically sound.
No.
It's sheathed cable.
It's just a mess, really, isn't it?
I don't know if there's a bit of exposed singles at the point of connection to the socket. I can't see. Poor erection methods.
I think Simon Goodship has nailed it for me. C3 without further information on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing obviously dangerous for what you can see. I mean, the cables are there; they're not sort of exposed live parts or anything.
No, and it could be, it could be a spur off of a spur, but we know that, depending on the actual loads that you plug in, that might not be a problem.
I think the biggest thing for me is just the way the cabling has been lashed in. There's just no due care and consideration for mechanical protection of it, and that straight away, I've always said, strain placed upon conductors is a key thing.
Yeah. This is one of those things, though. I mean, you can look at a job and go, "Oh, that's shit." You can't necessarily write that down. You have a comment, observations and comments, and you can then gently write down that it's shit. But in this case, if you're looking for a sound regulation, you're looking mainly at the
electrician
the
was an artist, so decided to run cables in a 45-degree angle, trying to create an artwork which didn't quite become an artwork. What does everyone think? Are we all going C3?
C3, we've got 5% C2, 86% C3, and 10%.
Yeah, I could see why the C2s, if that was in a nursery or something like that.
But again, it's relative to where this is. This could be in a nursery. This could be in a cupboard. I mean, we're assuming domestic in this webinar.
Yeah.
So domestically, location, risk of impact, utilization, maybe. Might
remember
push
a lot
it to
of
C2.
a lot of domestic homes are used as nurseries now. A lot of them are converted, aren't they? They're downstairs for nurseries. It's a up and coming business model, it would appear. Right. Okay. We'll leave that as a C3. I agree. I think it's a C3 with a little bit more investigation needed. Definitely. Here's another one, which John is going to say he didn't send to me.
No. I did these are all the Instagram ones, I think, first.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well, just shout, John, when it's yours. Right, here's a lash up. And I don't think there's a code for lash up other than C3, but 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 conductors now. I'll tell you what, the person who did that, round of applause, you're an utter fool.
That's
some work.
That must have taken a little bit of...
That's determination. I mean, so what, you open it up and immediately you just go, oh, God's sake. Now, I would C1 the wallpaper straight away, because that is just awful.
It's for reasons like this why a lot of electricians just sample the bare minimum, because they'll lower that and then those little cables will come out. And technically, eureka, you found a problem, but then they'll be going, oh, for fuck's sake, because they've then got to either fix it or they've got to then put all the pain and effort that the guy who originally put it in has to do as well.
Yeah, that's just...
How many times have you had a pair of pin nose pliers and you've been trying to push that cable back in, where they're too short, because the idiot before you also did that and he didn't tell you not to take that socket down ever again in the future?
Long nose pliers. Yeah, I shed a tear when I see them. So straight away, just plain devil's advocate here. While everybody's... If you could do a code thing on this...
Yep. And then the lug breaks. Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
So for me, straight away, I open that and I think, well, first of all, there's evidently damp in the wall because that box is corroding.
There is definitely some.
So the back box is corroding. I'm not seeing much mechanical protection on the cables as they enter the box.
No. Somebody knew about grommets, but didn't really. So what's happened there? They put the grommet in, but then the cable's been put in afterwards, or it's pushed the grommet in as they've pulled it, or it's pulled it as they pulled it. So
I'm also seeing, definitely when that gets put back, a massive strain placed upon the conductors. You can see even one of the neutrals there turning white where it's being pinched, just in the center of the screen there.
You can see the line conductor coming out to the top and the right. You see the right-hand line conductor, the red one?
Yeah.
The top of that has thinned a bit as it's been worn, probably brushing the ceiling of the socket as it's been pushed in there.
You then got the old green sleeving as well for the CPC. Do you know what? Without knowing any more, I think it's a C3 and an FI. I do. I think it's
assuming that everything else is technically okay. We have RCDs. We have an accessory that's not damaged. Is there any risk, or is there any evidence of thermal impact, thermal effects in there? Doesn't look like it.
Do you know what? If again, one of the things I like to do, and I know Dave, you think it's quite good, is I like to tie these into EAWR as well. So just on this, I could probably argue regulation 5 and 7. Installation, protection and placing of conductors. So it'd be covered, protected to prevent danger. I don't think that connection is in compliance with EAWR regulation 7. To be perfectly frank, I'm sure somebody will probably argue with me. And strength and capability of electrical equipment. That socket's designed for a certain loading. That circuit may get the cables in it will be far greater load if you've got the entire ring final 30 amps flowing through the back of it. That could put strain upon the conductor, on the connection, on the plastics around it. I just think it's a bodge which could give rise to danger. So I think it's a C3FI, but it could easily be a C2FI as well if you were going to tie it into the hierarchy of electricity at work regulations, which an electrician in a domestic home, if you're employed by a contractor, you are privy to electricity at work regulations. Don't think you're exempt.
Okay, let's see what everyone's done. This is a fairly good mix on this one.
Yeah, do you know what? There's merit for both, and it's good to see different balances of engineering judgment there, different perceptions of risk. It's
but this is why we get the questions all the time about is it C2, is it C3? Because again, people have differences of opinion, different interpretation here.
I think it's not a matter of that photo of will an issue happen. It's an issue of when it will happen.
Okay, so what do we? I mean, okay, so you've just gone through it. You've come up with a C3FI, correct?
Yeah, just based on that visual alone. But
so what would escalate you here to the C2?
Knowing my luck, putting it back and it going bang. Knowing my luck.
Maybe a sound of crackling, maybe evidence that the connection's not sound if there's excessive heating.
Well, and that's the thing as well. It's observing the installation in use as well, isn't it? This is where the inspection and testing of it, because you could find you put the socket back fine, and then you're going around doing ZS values having confirmed polarity, but when you're putting your plug in, you then start to hear an arcing noise from inside, which may tell you that the screw has failed. It may have been damaged or something like that, and there is an arcing within that lug. That would then straight away make me go, I'm going to see to that circuit.
I've also seen it before where people would take a spur from a socket and then they'd actually bring another cable back and they'd actually connect a ring from that spur. And then all of those extra cables will be putting a lot of loading in. So you need to look at the loading on that circuit.
Ian says he can't see the point in coding it 2 different codes as they both result in unsatisfactory. Yes, you're absolutely right. They do both result in unsatisfactory, but this is you defining the logic of your engineering reasoning and judgment. So this is like if I was a judge, and we showed earlier on, the judge saying, what was your decision-making process? Well, improvement was recommended, but also I needed to investigate it further. Now, if you write that down, that's fine. You can then use one code. But that logic should be defined somewhere within your observations. This is what makes the good engineering judgment and the good observation of risk, which makes a better EICR.
To me, there's just FI because I need more information. I need to know what impact with the resistance those cables are having, with the loading, that will push me possibly into C2 territory from that. Yeah, if there's no evidence of loading or issues like that, it might be down C3. Manufacturer might not like that many cables as well. I'd have to look into that. So there's a bit of FI work to do.
Yeah, I mean, most of these are going to have some further investigation needed. It's just whether you can do it at the time or not.
And it could be that when you're doing this, you turn around and you make your first observation is there is further investigation required on this installation based on time limitations and observations of potential defects or hazards found within the installation. So you could write it up like that, but I definitely think you need to be as clear as you can in defining how you've observed and how you perceive the risk. So
it's someone said here, so technically FI with every code. Well, the thing is, Mark, is how much time you've got for engineering judgment.
Yes.
If you can take the time to look at the manufacturer, to then research the manufacturer to make sure if the manufacturer's happy with a 4 times 2.5mm cables to go in their socket, then you can tick that. If you don't, then that's the point. Do we ignore it, or do we then put extra work? And I can completely understand that with regards to how rapid we have to do these days, this kind of work just doesn't sound doable.
And that's the thing. I was taught as well that you should always consider yourself standing in front of someone in a senior position, a judge, and you should be able to define and clearly explain. As the documents we were talking about earlier on state, we're trying to work from guidance and regulations and all the rest of it, trying to provide a qualitative service, a good service, where we can clearly understand and explain our understanding of what we've seen. And this is where a lot of the times we're seeing in EICRs people row because they're not taking the time to understand the reasoning behind the observations. But right, here we go. Another one.
This one, John?
No.
Well, John hasn't said anything, but I'm pretty sure these all come from John Maud. But there you go. Right. I'm obviously going bonkers because John sent me a folder.
Did you put any ones? Yeah, did you put any of John's in this?
I thought I'd put loads of John's in here.
Yeah, most of the ones at the end are mine. So.
Oh, are they? Oh, thank God.
We'll get to
right.
We'll get to
this is another one sent on Instagram. The dreaded plumber strikes. Now, it's fairly evident that there is some form of scorching on those cables. Those junction boxes are not fixed. It's a very difficult one because I believe that was in the back of a cupboard. I spun, forgive me, I did spin the picture around 90 degrees because it didn't come out right in the vertical, so I wanted it to fill the screen, but forgive the head tilting. Yeah. But that was actually in the back of a boiler cupboard.
Okay, so we've got issues with accessibility.
Those cables have definitely been exposed to external influences that potentially could have damaged them.
Scorching or are they mouldy?
I was told it was scorching.
It's quite uniform over the whole length of the cable. So
yeah, well, that's plumbers for you. You know what? You're all right. You could look at that as mould. Actually, I was told it was scorching, but yeah, you could suggest that could be mould.
It does seem very kind of,
and it is in a boiler cupboard where it's going to be damp and all the rest of it. I actually would, again, I'd see through it. I think, to be honest with you, see through it with an FI. Yeah. Again, depends. If I was there all day, I'd be pulling that apart.
Yeah, my with this kind of scenario, I always think about, it's always important for us to understand why we do this work. So I think of things like Emma Shaw, etc., the scenario that created that. And then we have wiring in such proximity to pipe work. Doesn't mean I change my code, but I will always make sure I've done a huge amount of investigation work to make sure there is no potential danger in that scenario. You know it's very important.
On that alone, on just mentioning the Emma Shaw stuff, you are right. The risk of having electrical connections floating near to conductive pipework, if there was a failure even of that crappy insulating tape to a single sheath conductor, because somebody's obviously damaged it, you could say that is potentially dangerous, urgent remedial action required. But this is me doing a drive-by now. So on my initial drive-by, quick, open the cupboard, look at that. It's a C3. More consideration, yeah, C2. But there's definitely further investigation into that.
This is the thing. If C3 leaves that like that,
yes,
you know, and it's a case of really if we're happy with that, and it'd be down to I'd be really looking for evidence that a couple of guys have mentioned floating. Yeah. So is there risk of vibration? So is there free movement of the joint boxes? The joint boxes aren't fixed clearly. So if utilization of this cupboard space, maybe for clothing, whatever, would result in vibration that would result in mechanical movement. That's going to, over time, potentially create further danger, and I'd want that out.
Do you know what? You're right. I would probably agree with you here, actually, and go C2.
If it's completely out of view and there's no risk of vibration movement or that, then I might keep it C3. But I'm not going to try to make it a C2, but I need to really be confident in this kind of area, because it's very important that we do our history, that we look at things like the Emma Shaw scenario, that we understand why it's important we take full respect to this work. And whenever anyone asks why we take so long or why we do it to such degree that we want to do it, those are the case studies we need to immediately just throw back at our clients to let them realize the importance of doing this properly, because it was doing this work incompetently that killed her. You know, so yeah. So again, F5 for me, and I'd be in there like a hawk. And probably my F5 might end up just moving it out of the way anyway. I don't know.
You probably would just, yeah, you'd remove them away from the pipework, put them in some sort of fixed base connectors, and
it does. Yeah, there is this problem obviously where we have this wiring systems because we've got obviously this is like some kind of you've got the twin and earths there, and you've got are those flexes coming out to the so it's part of the central heating wiring, I guess that is.
Yes,
so
it is.
Yeah, ownership of responsibility there.
Yeah, apparently it was in a boiler cupboard, and there was a water tank sat above it, and yeah, it was a complete mess. But that was what I was told. I don't think there'd be clothing in it because there would be mouldy clothing. I just think it's more of a. I could only assume that would be maybe somewhere out on a farm, maybe, or something like that.
Maybe. Remember, being domestic, any void space can easily be taken over to store product, to store chemicals, to store anything.
Yeah. But there's definitely external influences on the cable. There's definitely damage to that cable because they've obviously tried to tape it up to replicate an additional sheath, and the connections aren't fixed.
And again, that
and there's no mechanical protection on that cable as well. So yeah,
and again, remember that tape, whilst it may be considered as additional sheath, 416 does say that installation shall only be removed by destruction or with the use of a tool. So we can't consider it to be insulation in the 416 insulation medium if they put tape around it.
Yep. Yeah, and there you go. That just shows my own stupidity. If I'm doing a drive-by, I'll look at that, open up a door, look at that, and go, yeah, C3 requires improvement, close the door again. I'd spend 5 minutes thinking about it, and it's a C2. Engineering judgment, assessment, and understanding of risk. Right, okay. Did everyone get that? Or
yeah, we've got
C2s
and C2s and C3s there.
Fantastic. Okay. So hopefully everybody realised that it's a good balance of risk we're trying to address. In holy cow!
The biggest issue for me with this is time. We just don't get enough time to do the work justice, unfortunately.
No, and this is why I would never want to. If I was doing domestic, I would rarely want to do more than one a day, unless I was in a flat, and I have done them in voids where there's 4 circuits, and I could do one or two
I said
a day.
this in our podcast. For things like a small house, unless it's a small bed, one or two bedroom or a flat. Otherwise, I want my day's money, so I haven't got to rush to another job. Then I can keep my my work, my work there. What is this?
It's a mess. It's another loft special, isn't it? Really?
It's not one of mine, but I would put C2 on that because there's all those connectors just exposed. So C2 is a minimum, and there's no way you're going to get the lid on. Although the cables are quite nicely clipped on the sides. But
someone's put effort into that, but then realised when they were doing it that there was no way. This is the beauty of Wagos. Wagos could fix that mess. I believe it's some sort of central heating cluster mess. I've done a house where we've had 3 boilers, 7 cylinder stats, 8 thermostats, a number of valves. It was a listed building. All the central heating wiring looms had to go in the loft. You ended up with a big piece of plywood on the wall. You get all your cables up, then you got to try and figure out, how it all works. And if you've got a priority and changeover switch for the boilers, pump overruns. So this is a sort of mess you can get with the old wiring schemes. And somebody's obviously got to the point where they've done the follow the live game using connector blocks, and then said, "Sod the CPCs, I'll connect them later." For me, I would actually C1 that, and the reason being it's in a loft. In a loft, there are live parts that potentially a smaller person could go in and touch and could come loose. So
that's going to make you need to. That's going to make you need to remove that danger, ideally. So what are you going to do? Just turn it off?
I would turn around and say that needs to stay off until that gets fixed. And I guarantee the homeowner would probably say, "Can you please fix it?" And you'd be like, "Great, 5-6 hours in a loft for my sins," and I'd get a Sorel box, something decent size with a DIN rail or some sort of, because I don't think a Wago box will fix that. You need something of a chunky size that you're going to have to make. But again, I agree with John. I'm not going to disagree with John. C2 as a starter, but then applying a factor of risk and utilization of the installation and the variable what if. Who am I using my assessment of risk trying to protect in my coding? Is there a family with a small child? Do people go in the loft? I know when I was a child, my old man used to sling me and my brothers up in the loft because we were light and skinny and can just get thrown up and then just drop out and be caught. go and get stuff. So
I'm pretty
this
much
sort
on
of
that.
stuff-
I'm pretty much in that ballpark. It's the C2 to me as I look at it at first, and then it's a case of, right, is there any other information that takes this to C1? You know, is it likely that people are going to be, you know, walking or crawling past it when they go into the loft space? Is there evidence of scorching or evidence of heating? Is there other things that kind of push it into C1?
Great comment from Mark Dole. Couldn't get a cover on that if God himself tried. Yeah. It's a mess. It's an art. And the thing is, somebody's put the effort in. You can see.
I think
there's a
two
piece of
people have
plywood
done
there.
that. I think one person's done the cable clipping and cable running, and another guy who don't clearly
Don't give a toss.
give a
Or was just
monkeys.
getting the ump on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Friday
Just
finish.
turned around and had them all labelled up and was like, right, let's just get this all wired in.
It's a shame.
But there you go. Right, okay.
I had the poll on that one. We had, split C1, C2s.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, because I can agree with both those coding scenarios.
Yeah, and that's important. We're not here to say it's C2, you're wrong. It's C1,
Yes.
you're wrong. We're here to say,
We're not here to say that. But what we are here to try and introduce you to is maybe some new guidance in the document that is risk, and maybe a different way of working, and giving you more tools to think and consider how we're identifying risk, and also communicating that to your customers as well. But yeah, no, that's cracking. That's a really good one. Right, let's move on.
Moving on.
Well, this is one of mine.
Hey!
Glad to know. So I actually got to them.
Right.
This did have a cover on it originally, and it did have fuses in it as well. So that's obviously been taken out. The thing to look at here is the fact that these are rewirable fuses, 3036, and also look at what conductors are attached to each of the fuses in there and relevant to the values of those fuses.
It looks lovely and clean, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
John, do you hoover them out?
I'm going to say.
That looks very clean.
All right, so what rating fuses have we got here?
Right, well, if we go from the left, we've got the blue one, which will be 15 amps. The red one is 30. And then the two yellow ones, which are fairly uncommon, are 20.
Is it me, or am I going blind, or all them conductors pretty much the same size?
They're all the same apart from the yellow one in the middle.
So it looks slightly thicker.
Yeah.
Which is a bit bigger.
Well, it's the argument of the, and that's one of the biggest things for an inspector as well. We didn't even mention is the thickness of insulation curse, whereas it's become harder.
You used
now,
to be able to
different
feel a
manufacturers.
conductor, go, it's that. Nowadays, you don't know.
Well, the debate between 1mm, 1.5 has just got worse now because of the multiple strands of manufacturers and the thickness of insulation causes a problem. But yeah, okay.
This actually supplied some storage heaters.
It's an off-peak storage heater board.
Yeah.
So do we have any problems with 3036?
Are you asking me? Hopefully not.
I'm asking people.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the right kind of route to go.
Yeah.
I like the old school stuff. I'm sorry, but I do.
Okay, so
I
Chris
appreciate
has
it.
mentioned here, KA rating on them are only 1, so if PFC is higher than C2. So we need to, obviously,
Good one, Chris.
what's the prospective fault current? Because obviously the KA rating of 3036s is fairly non-existent. So if we assume the PFC is nice and low, yeah.
I think it was a flat, and it was probably TNCS, so it's going to be pretty low. So,
All right.
That's a good point, actually, they've made. Where's the CPCs for all of them? Because there's only one I could see, other than the main CPC for the board, and then I can only see one CPC connected for all 4 circuits.
I think it goes to that cable coming out to the right. Where are the circuits going anyway? They're going into that enclosure to the left, so the CPC is probably in there with them.
yeah, this is the one to the left. It was one of those 3-way split Wilex things with the off-peak and the hot water and the normal circuits all in the same box.
Is that where the CPCs were for the?
Probably.
Okay.
Because they all come from that enclosure there. So.
And it says there's plenty of copper visible on the tails. I mean, the manufacturers put this insulation on there to insulate. So is that kind of going against the grain of what the manufacturer wants when we still have exposed copper above there?
Can we also chuck into the debate about the guidance on identification of conductors within boards, and the now requirement to have both sheaths all the way up to the terminal themselves? Years ago, was that in the rigs or the guidance notes? Remember where these were selected and erected on previous editions where it may have been compliant. But we are inspecting to current regs. But it's all good debates to have within the brain.
Yeah, Chris Roderick's put there, fixed load, no risk of overload, which is correct for that 30 amp one, the red one, because these they had one storage heater on each. So although that is a single conductor and it's a 30 amp fuse, which is obviously not correct in terms of overload, a storage heater isn't going to overload that single conductor. So that's an interesting one.
So what do we think?
I'm just waiting for the guys on the poll. Dave's brought in 433.3.1. I guess that's overload protection, David. Am I correct? 434 is fault current. 433 is overload. Yes, good. It's been a while. Yeah, 433.1. John, you're right. I remember having to kind of contact a couple of companies that are doing training material, and they'd always use a 3036 device because it uses that CF factor. But then they'd use resistive heaters as the load, and you don't have to have overload protection if the load is not going to overload.
Yeah, okay.
It's so clean though. Keep looking at it. It's really, really
it's still. It looks like it was installed only a few months ago. I'm gonna see to that.
You'll see to it. Why are you see to it?
Age of installation, CPCs, exposed copper. It's a cumulative narrative, I think, with this. I would suggest that the board is life expired and may not provide sufficient protection for the installation in the event of a single and tragic failure. Yeah,
John, is the equipment on this modern or is it old?
It was pretty well. It was. I think it was 1970s stuff, and someone's put this thing in the 1980s as some kind of replacement for what was in the one to the left of it. It was all ripped out and replaced in the end. The other thing here is these 20 amp rewirable fuses, because of that correction factor of that 0.725, you can't have 2.5 millimeter cable on a 20 amp rewirable fuse, but you can on a 20 amp circuit breaker.
Okay.
Now, in this particular case, it's a fixed load, so not necessarily a huge issue, but it's another thing to consider.
No wonder they sold so many retrofit breakers.
Yeah.
Right. What does the survey say?
It's quite a mixed one on this one. This is good.
This is a good one.
All right.
This is a good one, to be honest with you. Oh, the majority C2, C3, FI. Yeah, John, I could spend an hour talking about this one, actually.
I want to know a couple of things. I want to know the prospective fault current.
Yeah.
I want to know, obviously, the users to see if the ends will end up using, if one day the heaters will be ripped out and maybe they'll put sockets. Just, as you say, you're saying about life expired. I want to know about the future, because the idea of these, obviously, we're going to inspect for the future. So I just want to know the use. If they are just simple heater systems that don't overload, there's little to no signs of thermal stresses.
One other thing, 526. Connection to conductors. You look at the tails there. If that's underneath the stairs and I hang my clothes on it, or a jacket or something stupid, or somebody goes in and pulls it, there's no clamp there. So all that's going to do is just increase the bending radius.
You're on about the cable coming downward
main
out the
tails.
board.
Yeah, the main tails.
Which
and I'm seriously worried about the one CPC there, to be honest with you, because that's just weird.
The one is from that white cable to the right.
To the right.
And the other three are from they're in the board on the left.
In the board on the left, yeah.
Ah, right, gotcha. Sorry, apologies. So yeah, they've looped through there. Okay, gotcha.
They do exist. They're just not in the place they should be. So.
Oh, great.
Cool. That's a nice one.
That's a good one, that one. Right, let's move on.
Right, this one, all we're looking at here is the pipe in relation to the consumer unit, because we'll actually see this consumer unit in a later picture when it's with the cover off. So it's just the pipe on this one.
Okay, what are we saying about the pipe then, John?
Well, the pipe is in such a position that you can't actually get the cover of the consumer unit off without sort of trying to bend it around the back of the pipe and all that. So
yeah, never a good thing.
It's a bit of a weird angle. It is possible to get the cover off, but you've literally got to undo the two little screws and then sort of try and shift it around in various different directions, and eventually you can get it in a position where it just about comes out of there.
Okay.
So about sort of accessibility of equipment.
So, shall I throw some controversy in this?
Yes,
go on then.
Let's throw some controversy. So I've got the Codebreaker book out, which defines this as a non-codable observation. I'll read it out. Proximity of gas services to electrical wiring is not strictly 7671 issue. Regulation 5283 goes some way to cover this. Regulation 528.3 defines this as a proximity to services that produce heat, smoke, or fumes, which are likely to be detrimental to the wiring. I wouldn't say it's detrimental. I say you just can't get the cover off. When located beneath the gas service where it's caused condensation. In this case, 7671 only states precautions shall be taken. There is no mention of distances that gas and electrical services should be in 7671. However, minimum distances of segregation are given in table 6.2 of BS 6891 2015. And it says minimum segregation between gas and electrical intakes is 150 mil, and minimum segregation between gas service pipes and electrical accessories, switchgear or wiring as 25 mil.
This is all guidance for them, not guidance for us. Is that right?
Yes. This is guidance for the gas fitters and the plumbers.
So where's the guidance for us?
Probably buried in a guidance note that's littered with mistakes. Oops. Did I say that loud? Sorry.
Okay, I'm just looking for something you can talk.
What else have we got on here, John? Then we got two main switches. Oh, it's a BG board. Oh God.
Yeah, there is a problem with what's in the board. Let's say we'll see that in a later picture.
Okay.
So we'll.
Well, on initial one, I'm going to throw it as a. Yeah. Oof. My brain tells me C3, but I want to go C2.
Yeah, I think I put C3 on this because it's not. There's no actual danger there. It's just the inconvenience of not being able to get the cover off properly, and obviously pipes in proximity to other parts.
Yep, agree. Totally agree.
I would sit down square in front of that enclosure, and I would look at the impact the pipe makes for me to safely work on that panel. And if working on that panel is compromised by the presence of that pipe, I would consider an impact with regards to maintainability, accessibility, and I'd probably use Electricity Work Regulation 15 to say that it's not as safe as it could be to work on.
Yep. Okay, so what does the survey say?
Survey's going C3. Let me just
look at this. I mean, the labelling could do with some work.
Yeah, there's
always
with it there. So
I'd see C3 it just for being a BG board. To be honest with you.
He did say that.
Just for the make. I've had too much British General stuff fail on me. I have spent too much of my own personal and private money on BG stuff for it to just fail miserably.
Well, both Chris and Mark have said C1 for using a BG board.
Yeah. Screwfix special, isn't it?
It's a Screwfix special, yeah. Just like the old GE Electric ones that Screwfix used to knock out. Right, okay.
The front cover's not there because it's obviously can't go off. Right, this one is a fuse, obviously. It's a rewirable fuse, and this is how it was taken out. And there's some bits missing from this.
There it is.
Which is why the wire has been sort of just twisted round in that fashion, because there should be to screw at each end that the wire actually goes round.
Is that a staple? Is that a paper clip?
It is actually fuse wire. It's probably the wrong size.
I was going to say, it looks almost like someone's managed to odge your paper clip round it. But
the fixing screws, the one on the left is just missing, and the one on the right is actually sheared off.
It's sheared off.
Well, it looks like there's some scorching there.
Yeah. A little ball of molten copper on the bottom edge there.
Our favourite one, the old asbestos pad. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely C2 without a doubt as a minimum. And to be perfectly frank, I would, definitely C2 as a minimum in a house. I would probably put a danger notification
in a home with obviously asbestos present. I mean,
you're going to have that though. I mean, I've got asbestos on my shed.
Yeah. But this switchgear is obviously. Remember, these devices are designed to be ordinary person utilization, replacing. Yeah. So you've got to think here about the safety of the homeowner actually replacing these fuses.
Indeed.
So there's I
think this is why people
elevate your level of risk there.
But this is why we went away from fuse wire, isn't it, to resettable trip switches to protect the ordinary person who was probably doing themselves harm with replacing the wire with the wrong thickness.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, 3036 is still fine. So rewirable fuse wires themselves are still acceptable. But this particular one, where you have, homeowners exposed to asbestos every time their fuse pops, you could probably just add a little bit level of risk on that for me.
Okay.
So
let's unveil it. Come on. What has everyone said?
They're pretty much in between C2 and C1 here.
Yeah. My initial thought is C2 as well. Again, depending on a number of external factors and use factors and the overall condition of the board that I've took it from, it would very probably creep up to a C1, because an installation that age, I'm sure you'll probably find quite a lot wrong.
There's probably many more codes to go with this board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but this is more of an educational slide, this one, I think.
As I said earlier, I start at C2, then I look at the elevated levels of risk or even lowering levels of risk to see if I move that code. So this one, I'd start at C2, but if there's evidence that's been regularly replaced, that the homeowners are regularly gaining access to asbestos, I might just add some of that utilization with the presence of asbestos to C1 it.
Yep, totally agree.
Depending on how often they do that. If they never go in there at all, then it's probably going to stay at C2.
Hey, Dave, next one. Now, this is a common site.
Yeah. This is a Wilex rewirable fuse box thing. Several things wrong with this. Most obvious being, of course, on the left side there, those big chunks of brass.
I'm going to assume this is readily accessible, yeah?
Yep, it is.
Okie dokie. This is
a shed. And you can just walk in there, and there it is on the wall, about sort of eye level. So that's one.
C1?
And yep, C1.
C1?
Along the bottom edge there. That's
going to be live, isn't it?
And the other thing that's wrong here is if you look at those three fuses, they're not actually in line. And the reason they're not in line is because the plastic shields are actually missing from all four of these positions. So if you take another fuse out, you're going to get the same situation again.
Yeah.
So, what a mess. Yeah, I'd see one that.
Definitely see one there.
I'm going to stop the poll because, this is one of those. This is one of those guarantees.
Yeah, 100%.
Look at that. Hey, bingo, JW, 100%.
Okay.
Fantastic. Right, moving on.
Not supposed to say that.
So this was sent to me the other day. We've got loads and loads of pictures. We could do a webinar just on insulation affecting consumer units. Now, I've never, ever, ever seen this in a consumer unit where it's fairly evident somebody has pumped foam insulation from one side and it's filled the board. And they're them GE specials. These are Screwfix specials, these are. Okay, I remember one of the early boards that I used to fit quite regularly in houses was these GE boards when they first brought out their split load RCD variation. They even did a single RCD, non-RCD variation in the 16th edition. But they were pretty sturdy. They were good balance of quality and cost. Jesus, look at the state of that. I mean, where do you start with that one? You can see where it's expanded into it and the cover's been taken off by the inspector. But where do you begin with that?
Well, what can you do other than say this needs to be...
It's a nightmare.
I mean, yeah.
It's an utter nightmare. So, yeah, I know what the actual... It doesn't stop expanding. Right. Ghostbusters comes to mind.
Keeps going. Yeah, Vigo. So does this material have any thermal impact to the cables?
Of course it does.
Yep. Yeah. So there's going to be a reassessment.
There are more and more places banning this PE foam as well. This expandable foam, because you can buy it in a can and it says, fire rated, but they won't define fire rating. And there's all sorts of different fire resistant and all. To be honest with you, I saw a job the other day where the person was using some pink foam filler that was fire rated. So I took a piece of it and I went outside into the car park and I set fire to it.
Yeah.
Nah, sorry. Gives off black smoke. Nah.
Yeah, I might be... there's a place I'm going to tomorrow, actually. It's got a load of this in the riser, so I might just steal a bit and see if it...
Take it.
Okay.
Put a flame to it for about 30 to 60 seconds and just watch the black smoke come out.
It'd be interesting if you can take a sample and run a cable through it and put it under load and then see the temperature variation where it runs through this material.
Don't give him any more ideas for videos.
Yeah.
He's got thousands to do.
Yeah, we have too many already.
just to see what the thermal impact is on this. Okay, so we know this. So are we at C2 here?
Yeah, I'm C2 all day. C2 and a recommended board change, because I am not spending hours picking that all off. I'm unscrewing that from the wall, stripping it all back.
Start again.
And just clearing a space for the cables and investigating further.
And the other thing, you've got no RCDs there whatsoever, so it's obviously a fairly old installation, so there's going to be other things that doesn't comply. So
that's late 90s, that is. Yeah. I remember them boards well. They were very popular in Screwfix.
There we go. Okay, 70% C2. Okay, so we've got
when GE did boards.
yeah, we've got 70% C2 on this, 18% C1. Maybe the fire risk is also in affecting.
Does the foam affect the MCB operation? I think the thermal performance of the cabling and the board would be brought into question.
Yeah.
Um,
Okie dokie.
Right. I'm just going to say this for Sean, but when I see that sort of thing, it does bore my piss. There you go, Sean. I've said it. Right. Here's a nice, quick, simple one. Wonderful weatherproof sockets that we find everywhere, with a very simple visual inspection observation, because we inspect before we test.
Yeah.
What do we think? I quite like that socket because it's a changeable one.
It's BG, by the way.
Is it? I hate it. I hate it immediately, and I'll give you a million reasons why. It's just, well, the insulation resistance for the LEDs in series is a pain in ride. I'll shut up anyway.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
an outside pocket. It was on the outside wall, exposed to rain, and the cover was open when I found it. So,
what did you code it? Oh, what does everyone else think? Yeah, I think everybody's going C3. Sean's being over the top as usual, drama queen, C2ing it.
Well, obviously, in this case, you've got to. I mean, John just said the cover was up, so we've got to then say, well, is that adequate IP protection if the cover is always up?
Do you know what? Can I see to it just for the neons? Because the neons were a great idea years ago, so that people could have a visual confirmation that this power supply to that equipment was live.
Mm-hmm.
But they're a nightmare when doing testing, and they always fail anyway, and then they just make the accessory look rubbish. So it's, to me it's a C3, but I'd probably see to it now because it's BG and neons.
And the neons are pointless because when the cover's closed, you can't see them anyway. So
you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the lid was up. So the IP rating is obviously an issue that needs coding. And obviously, was there evidence of the cause of this? Was it just an impact from use?
There was an extension lead plugged into this, but there was nothing plugged into the extension lead. And the extension lead was trailing outside on some decking. And that actually was full of water, which obviously showed up as a fault.
Wow. When
it was unplugged, the insulation resistance on this showed perfectly fine, bar the neons, obviously.
Mm.
So
it is a good point. Mark Holmes has basically said, oh, hang on, it's disappeared now. If C3, nothing would be done for 5 years. And there's some great comments from Daniel. Outside, liable to temperature rise, fluctuations, condensation, and that could make that worse.
Yes.
It's a good point.
It's like
think about the external influences.
This is what I said about 20 minutes ago. This is about testing for continued use, isn't it? So we've got to think about this being used in the future. So you've got a lid that's not being shut. You've got moisture ingress.
And a precedence where you found it where it's not been shut, so you know that the users of the installation are not using it as it's intended by manufacturer. Mm-hmm. So
see, I've got these ones. They've got this spring, so you lift it and they go.
Yeah,
because I've got in my garden because I've got kids and stuff. So if they lift the flat goes down. The flat doesn't rest upward.
So there's another design flaw for BG. So looks like it's a C2.
Spring. Yeah, these have got a spring in it. So if you open it to that position, the spring actually holds it open.
Oh, brilliant!
And when you close it, it does hold it shut, but it snaps those two positions. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Not a particularly good design.
So the utilization here, the users are clearly not using it properly as instructed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we looking at then as far as the pole? Nearly there, folks.
C3 to
C2
C2 again
with a good balance of C2.
I can see the C3, but with the user consideration and the environment, I may be in C2 territory. Yeah.
I'm kind of agreeing with Mark actually, because he's bang on right. If you have a cracked or damaged socket, a crack or damaged socket could easily be a C1.
Mm.
And just because it's a slim crack doesn't mean it won't become a worse one.
Yeah.
And the in between C3 and 1, yeah. So yeah, no, I'm actually going to completely agree with you, Mark, and go C2 again. Good assessment of risk there. Good engineering judgment. So yeah, I agree with that. But
good.
Right.
What's next?
Oh, Jesus.
Right, this is a combination boiler, and that's the wiring for it. Nicely wrapped up in some insulation tape with white emulsion slapped on.
Right, well, let's go home then. It's all jobs are good in there, isn't it, for the gas safe, registered, regulated industry. God, that's a mess, isn't it? I hate push fit. Can I see one just to push fit alone?
Before we start talking about this, I mean, scope-wise, many people might exclude this from their inspection because it's not part of the fixed. So where do you sit with that?
Central heating wiring is part of a fixed installation. Without a doubt, I've always had that. I've always done. I used to do central heating wiring for British Gas. It forms part of the fixed installation. It's just the controls part. There is a bigger issue here, which we need to do a webinar on the whole gas fitters doing electrics and all the rest.
But
of
that's the cable going into the boiler. So that's
yeah. So that will be
an equipment accessory. That's a cable.
Yeah, there's two cables. One is the power for the boiler, and the other one
Yes.
is the thermostat connection.
Yeah, I've always treated that as part of the fixed wiring. I don't treat that as an accessory. Fixed wiring.
Who in the chat always tests 100% of the central heating system when they do an EICR?
So I'll ask another question. If you ask the IET, if it runs on mains voltage, does it fall under electricity work regulations? They will say yes. Does it fall under BS 7671? They will say yes, because we've asked that question already, and we're still waiting on Gas Safe to give us some sort of common sense answer, which at the moment they can't because they've fixed bayonets and put the barriers up. Do you test? Would you include HVAC on an EICR? Yes. And somebody hopefully would then go, oh, you've used SY really badly, and I'd say rip it out, because I can't stand SY because it's never installed correctly. Never mind glanded or anything else. And I found tons of rusted SY. I think I'll put one in the industrial commercial one of SY where it's just completely broken down and corroded. But
So,
yes.
most people are saying no, they don't.
Okay, that's fair enough if that's what they do. But again, it's if you're making a declaration that the entire fixed electrical installation is safe.
Well, the problem is people don't know what the installation is within the scope because they're not told. Guidance Note 3 doesn't cover it. The Service Inspection Testing of Electrical Equipment embraces it into their system. So there's confusion.
Really?
Yes.
So they've put it in the PAT testing code of practice, even though it's part of buried into the fabric.
It's equipment. And it says in there, in the code of practice, it says if the equipment is in the building fabric, then you may have to elevate that into this work, but only if it's within the building fabric. But the equipment itself...
Essentially, wiring is in the building fabric. It's buried in the
well,
wall.
You go into a boiler.
And...
No, you're talking about just the stat cable to the boiler. When you go into a boiler cupboard with all these other cables going to the 3-volt valves and all this stuff.
So we don't look for unnecessary strain placed upon terminations, even though it's mains voltage and the relevant safety accessible joints. It's all PAT testing stuff. I've evidently missed something because PAT testing has always been a low-level priority for me in that respect. And I'm being honest with that. But for me, I used to test central heating wiring.
You'll find that the training and everything will say you go to the fixed point of utilization, which will be the fuse connection unit.
I have asked Gas Safe and the IET about this, whether minor work certificates should be issued on central heating wiring, and I've got it in writing from both of them that it should be. It's a minor works. It's under 7671 scope. That's from the head of the Wiring Rigs Committee themselves. We definitely need to do a webinar, probably next year, because we'll be busy, that covers and explores this a bit more. But for me, that's a C2 just based on the fact them terminations are rubbish, and that could be accessed by an unskilled person or a child. It's too much of a risk.
Yeah, this was in a kitchen, and the boiler was mounted above a worktop, so about 5 inches below that is the worktop, and there was no cover over the pipes or anything, so that was just right in the kitchen, clearly on display. So,
and David Berridge has made a brilliant comment. At 65 quid a test, no chance. I am not getting involved yet with that 65 quid, £80 drive-bys, that extent and imitations that one day someone will sit in front of a judge on. What have everybody else said? Sorry, on have you put the?
Did I launch the poll for this one?
I
don't remember if I did or not.
If not, don't worry. Just all.
Yeah, we'll move on. I've got C3s.
Okay.
Okay, this
I'd
is
see to it, but yeah.
Yeah, these are two separate installations. This is about bonding, and these are the water supplies that come in. And the thing here is, what are we actually connecting to, and what are we actually bonding? So look carefully at the pipes, and also what's above and below where the bonding comes.
I love that one on the right. That's great.
Yeah, great. That's why I put them together, because I thought they were both great examples of insulated inserts.
So the one on the right, we've got the blue pipe MDPE or plastic coming in there. That's the main stop tap. A bit of copper, and then we've got a white plastic push fit, which goes to the rest of the system, and you can see there's another grey one in the back there. And then the one on the left, that's a white plastic pipe coming in. And then the thing above it is one of these things that claims to stop lime scale.
All right.
It is a metal bodied item, but if you look at the bottom of it, it's got a black plastic push fit connection. So again, what are we actually bonding to?
Mm-hmm.
So the bonding's present, but does it need to be present? And if it does need to be present, is this really the right place to be connecting it?
Okay, so
the left one, the plumbing pipes in the rest of that building were all copper on that left one.
All right, so the left one has branched metal pipework throughout.
Yes.
Okay.
The other one was all plastic.
All plastic.
Or mostly plastic. There was a
So is there a difference in risk in those two different scenarios? What do we think? You know, I'm going in the poll because this is quite an interesting one, this one.
I've got a very controversial view on this.
Go for it.
Based on what I know, and you know what I'm talking about, I genuinely believe that we will end up going back to EBADOS rather than EBAD or ADS, sorry. We'll be going back to EBADOS. And that the only reason I say that is because at the moment we're looking at a lot of earthing issues with the DNOs and diverted neutral current issues. And I think one of the only ways to protect an installation is to apply the method of EBADOS, ensuring
I think
all
it's
metalwork
also
is of the same potential.
I think it's also one of the easiest. I think it's also one of the easiest ways to just get everyone to understand it the same way. It wasn't so frustrating or confusing when we had EBADOS.
Yeah.
You know? Since they started to question the need for it, people started to kind of tiptoe around it or just get confused with it. All right, so we've got 41% FI for this one.
So it's not a bad shout. It's not a bad shout.
And a couple of people will be commenting, I know, because I know who's in this room, that they'll be saying, well, you know, it could go under the ground in, you know, later on, some of the pipe work. So it could, you know, the metal pipe work that John's described for the left installation may go under the ground.
Yeah, perfect place.
Has put tests required to see where bonding may be required, but not where they've done it. So FI, yeah, because that's certainly that one on the left where it's metal for most of the rest of the property. Yeah, you can't assume that it's actually just connected through that bit of plastic because it could go into other parts of the building or under the floor or who knows what. So,
well, I think there was a good picture put on social media a while ago. I can't remember by who, where they had a plastic MDP gas main, but it went into a gas box, but the box was half buried in the ground. The gas pipe then went out of the box into the ground, through the wall under the ground, and then back up into the house, all in copper. So that straight away you'd think, well, bond it. But I do think, I think in the near future, I mean, we'll do it again. We'll do a separate webinar on this, but we're looking at diverted neutral current phenomena. We're looking at a number of issues with network stability, network configuration, and I think it's fairly evident to say, based on the research that we have been doing, the networks are a bit of a mess. We need to untangle this web so that we can present it to you guys. But I do think I've always believed that bonding, regardless whether you have an insulated insert, I would just do it. Although whoever put that cable on that right-hand side one needs to use a crimp lug, because I hate seeing that, because any unskilled person can just pull that out.
So you've just mentioned diverted neutral current, so I'll just mention it. Earlier on, we had the gas pipe in front of the panel. I thought about diverted neutral currents, you know, where we had that proximity to the board with that gas pipe. But yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, I think there's definitely one thing, but we'll cover it in another webinar.
Yeah.
Next one.
Right, this is a cable with a thing on the end of it. This was in a bathroom. This is under the basin in the cupboard that's directly under the basin. And what we've got there is it was connected and it was live.
This is mains power?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
230 volts.
It's very common, that. I've seen that in lots of places where an old macerator might be disconnected. Strip it back, connect to block it. The plumber does it. Away you go. Puts a new trap on.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times where a supply's been put in there for a macerator. There's a change in design. The cable's just left there.
Yeah, it's too dangerous though.
But what happens? They do that to test it, but then they leave it because obviously the other trade hasn't put in the system, and it gets left.
Yeah,
you know, it's been stripped and terminated for testing. Looking at that, you can see the CPCs there for the R1, R2 testing, but it's just been left there, abandoned, or just.
There's a valuable bit of guidance there, though, isn't it, for the person signing off that certificate? Make sure whatever you do, because I've seen this before, and we've all heard stories of this. When you are signing off that installation is complete, make sure it is complete and there's not a few variations that the builder's waiting that you're doing on trust, because these sorts of things happen. And every story I've heard around these sorts of cables is, oh, well, the builder said he'd come back, or the electrician said he'd come back. There's a certificate. Yeah, he sent an email. He forgot about it.
So where are we with this? I mean, C2, C1?
I'm going to go C1 just because it's under a cupboard and a small child could open it.
Yeah.
Just grab onto it.
I would often think C2 due to the reduced size, but readily accessible under a cupboard where children may go, elevates that to C1 for me.
And in a bathroom as well.
In a bathroom.
Yeah. So yeah, C1, I think that's fairly...
Sean has said just needs enclosing appropriately. Absolutely right, Sean, it does. But we're not there to enclose it appropriately. We are there just to code it. This is just, but I don't disagree with you, Sean, in any way, shape or form. A decent IP-rated Wago box, stuffing gland, absolutely solves the problem. Yeah, probably 10, 15-minute job. But
in my opinion, a decent inspector does that for clients as well, helps get rid of the problems. But obviously, there are many inspectors, call them inspectors, but
the good inspector will always try and again do the morally right thing. We'll try and remove C1s where it's reasonably practicable, because you'll have that judge asking, "What did you do?" And if you turn around and say it wasn't in my scope, yet it was a £2.
What action did you take?
Yeah.
We see a lot of people go, oh, I mean, they saw it the other day on the webinar, oh, write a danger notification.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that as a record.
But that is it. That's more covering you than protecting them.
Yeah. I'm going to confess now, because they can't sack me for it. But a company I worked for, I used to go into installations to do wiring on central heating systems. And if there was no earthing and bonding, I would install the bonding. But the company wanted, I think it was like £400 minimum. And if the customer didn't have that money, I would do it anyway, because I knew the impact of not having it in place. By the way, just for anyone realizes, that company was a large multinational company or a shower anyway, so I had no problem in doing it. And for me, it was more about actually protecting the families that I was doing the wiring in, rather than the big multi-corporate organization who wanted to. A lot of houses, you'd have the water, especially where I was in Essex, you'd have the electrical installation, the gas and the water main in the same cupboard. So it was just a loop of cable, and they wanted £400 for it.
Yeah.
No. Fix it. I don't want to go into the dock for that.
Right, this one, several things here. The main thing is look at the 32 amp circuit breaker and what's attached to it, and also look at the tails coming in, or what's left of them at least.
Yeah, this is not healthy.
Jesus.
So yeah, that 32 amp one in the third one from the left.
What load was on that?
Wow. That was I can't remember actually. I think it was a socket in a kitchen.
Yeah, that's classic MEM 3871 board. What we got? We got VIR there. We've got connectors on the CPCs. I don't know why they probably just couldn't extend over to the earth bar. It just looks like there's been poor alterations and additions there. Whether that VR even has a CPC. In fact, you can see on the neutral, Dave. You can see, if you just look where the twin and earth is, the red, yellow, and blue, the 3-core they've used, you can see there's exposed strands of that VIR.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm most certainly all right. It's within an enclosure. The enclosure was on, I'm assuming. Strain placed on the terminal. As a minimum, it's a C2. As a minimum,
it's a C2. And then I look at things like the strain on that incoming main.
Oh yeah.
What protection's on that? Is it a 60 amp service fuse or something?
This mess was supplied from another consumer unit.
Oh, great. Daisy chaining.
Yes.
Yeah. What he do?
This was an old one, and then some person put a new one in the kitchen, which was also a total disaster.
I think we're going to see some examples of that on our commercial industrial ones, where people run boards off of boards, then wonder why they don't get the necessary fault current values to trip any breakers. But
so, I mean, we start with C2, but do we need to see anything else to go up to C1 here? Do we need to see heating? Do we need to see
I think it's on the verge of C1, because you've got exposed or damaged insulation there.
It's most likely that's going to happen within the system as well. Some of that damage.
Do you know what? Apologies. I was looking at that neutral and I thought it went into strands. He's right. One of the chaps online has said it's a CPC. Yeah. Apologies, Ian. I need new glasses. And there's me trying to make these photos as big as possible. Yeah, you're right. That's a CPC there.
Yeah, the line has already got exposed copper on it, just to the top above there. So that insulation is degrading and disintegrating already.
If you follow, the 32 amp VIR, if you follow it up, goes left, just when it goes behind the red, after that, there's a bit of exposed there. So there is damage to that. Yeah.
What did the panel say?
Well, the panel's gone to C2 and some have gone on to C1.
Okay.
So
majority C2. Okay. Some C1. Again, it's in the eye of the inspector, the identifier of the risk.
Yeah, and also obviously there's lots of other stuff which you can't see in this picture. So,
is this one of yours, John? So what did you do this? Did you do a C2 here? C1?
I think this was a C2 because I think from memory it only supplied a single socket, which so there wasn't any risk of actually overloading it. But,
so you're thinking of both, you're now thinking about other stresses that this will then have to take. That makes sense. Okay, yeah. All right.
Next one.
Right, this one is a bit of a mess. And the main thing here is the incoming supply on the top right there and how the earth connection has been implemented with that interesting assembly of bits.
Very creative.
So Steeple. So Steeple are a sub-brand of Electrium, also known as Crabtree and Wilex. Doesn't mean necessarily you can install their breakers without telling them. Is that a Legrand breaker in there?
That one on the left, that's one of those, I think they were Control Gear Direct at some point.
The reason they get bought out by Legrand, I'm pretty sure that symbol was for Legrand. Legrand went into board manufacturing for a while.
The reason that's there is probably because Steeple is a brand that Denman's wholesalers sell,
right?
Or they used to sell, and then they changed manufacturer, and that B32 at the end.
Looking underneath it,
sell now. So in theory, it's all Denman's, but
looking underneath it, you can see buzz bar. There's clearly not enough clearance there.
Yeah,
that breaker does not like that board.
No, it doesn't. It's been bodged in, swarf in the board. Naughty boys. The line conductors just look like a bit of a twisted mess. What else have we got? Oh God, you look at the fixing screw. I hate countersunk screws on boards without penny washers. I'm a big fan of a penny washer with a pan head screw, so that you apply the correct
I've heard you
on the
shout at people for that.
So I have shouted at people, haven't I? Yeah, I've gone ape. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you did hear me have a go at someone for that, didn't you?
Panheads, and
panheads. Is that a pyro coming into it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Oh, so this is a retrofit on a. Okay, so probably.
So what do we think about this earthing conductor connection? I mean, it's not got the BS951.
Hang on a minute. That is a Tembi clamp that someone's butchered and put around the pot.
Yeah. So there's no safety electrical connection. Did not remove label on that.
The pyro is not attached to the consumer unit body. What they've just cut a massive hole out the top.
It's just floating in.
Passed it through, floating, and then they've attached that clamp.
They have, because the body of the pot is bigger, isn't it? And the bush. I would have probably gone to actually regland that and actually have a dedicated CPC.
In a metal enclosure, shorted it.
Yeah, that should have been glanded correctly into a metal enclosure with a dedicated C. So it's.
But is this just C3 stuff, or is this C2?
I'd C2 it, to be honest with you.
Is the integrity of the earthing?
Integrity earthing. So that's a split RCD board, AC type, which you know my views on it. I think we'll be coding them C2s and C3s pretty soon.
We said that last year, didn't we?
We did. We said that. Yeah, trust me, everybody, it's coming. You'll be coding AC RCDs whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
The pyro for me is the biggest concern there, I think. There's a bit of copper showing on some of the conductors on the circuits. That 6 amp lighting circuit, that's looks like they've doubled up on the lighting circuit straight away. The one in the middle.
You have
there's definitely some further investigation.
When you have many of these little things like this, do you guys add each individual observation, or do you just do workmanship as one to represent those termination methods? See, all these little terminations are just slightly picking out all these little bits of copper.
It depends on the person ordering the work. It kind of depends on the inspector and the person ordering the work. Because for me, I would say like swarf could be improved to C3. Fixing detail, I would take that countersunk screw out rather than wait for someone to lean on that board and then have that board fall down and put all strain on that gland. But then again, in the same breath, I'd then say, well, that gland should be repotted, re-terminated with a new board or the board lowered. But then again, you probably can't lower the board because of the method of installation, and it looks like there's mounted directly to plaster. So there's a level of stripping and rework that needs to be done there that takes your improvement required into, if you don't do this, what is the actual risk? I mean, I'm looking at 2 6-amp breakers with 5 circuits potentially in it. I'm looking at AC split load board, which the connected use of the installation. Are we using intelligent stuff? Have we got inverter drive washing machines? You know, the stuff that requires the A-type, is that a considerational factor? Realistically, it's screaming, shouting C3, but I would, just because of the pyro and the method of connection for earthing, because most codes around earthing are a C2, I would suggest that, I mean, it looks like there's a fan on the right-hand side of that board. If it's there and it's going to get knocked, it's going to suffer from vibration. That terminal could come loose. So for me, it's a C2 based on the earthing and termination of the gland. That's just a view of it. And also, yes, sizes of the pyro, although pyro can carry far more than others, which is why a lot of the old buildings have got the submains wired in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little bits in this one, but the incoming was the main thing.
This is John Ward's board again, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the same one with the gas pipe in front of it we saw before.
Hey,
you got it off.
Now we can see what's inside. And pay attention to what types of devices are actually installed inside this, what was a twin RCD consumer unit.
So we've got a main switch replaced for an RCD.
Yeah, it was a twin RCD, a BG one, and then the left RCD has been removed, and someone's put a switch in there instead of the wrong.
So a Luden main switch.
Yeah.
Which is a modern one because it's got torque setting on it, so it's pretty recent.
Was that, do you think, to stop a nuisance tripping fault?
Yeah, almost.
Yeah,
certainly.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, probably stopped it tripping.
I really don't like those types of lugs. They just look. It just makes. Yeah, it worries me when I see them boards with all that metal on show, and it looks like it's putting strain. That neutral in the top right corner looks like it's putting massive strain on the neutral bar.
We've seen a lot of neutral fires, and it's often that lugging that's one of the culprits. Okay, so I'm assuming here then we're going to have circuits that need an RCD but now don't have one.
That's right.
Okay.
So,
different manufacturer assembly.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get this poll going.
I can't see what time.
And a nice
and without
screw at the top left window washer.
Without understanding the rest of the installation, I can see a cable going up into another assembly, a board. It's been mounted on ply. You can see down the bottom, there's the old meter board and the tails coming up through the back. Yeah. My heart is telling me C3, but again with the RCD and the
RCD must push it to
the installation
if the RCD needed.
Yeah.
The other thing here is that the RCD on the right is an 80 amp, I believe. And if you look at the actual circuit breakers it's supplying, you've got 332s, a 40 and a 16.
So
keep it warm.
Now, if the main fuse is an 80 amp, then that's
3 rings.
Okay, but if the main fuse is 100 amp, that's
not well balanced, is it?
It's not protected against overload. So,
well, it's like, I mean, we've got 132 on this other RCD that's not an RCD anymore, but that's obviously, is that a cooker? No, is that a shower circuit?
It was either a cooker. I think it was the cooker. It was a cooker and a shower in this one.
Yeah, so there's no
Garrow unit then.
Yeah.
Just on another note, John, the comments rightfully highlighted. Where's the bonding on that?
Yeah.
Well, the bonding may go down to the main earth terminal by the meter. In all fairness, a lot of them do that. They just have a CPC coming out the board. I'm not a fan of putting bonding into a domestic board. I would always rather have it on an earth terminal that's easy to disconnect with a tool rather than going into a live board. So for me, I don't put bonding in boards. It's always separate. But yeah, it's depending on choice and accessibility and all the rest of it.
But as we look into things in the future, we may start looking at those terminals when outside. We may have to think about enclosing them.
Oh, yes, we will potentially in future. Yes.
Yeah.
What was the judgment on it all then?
All right, we have got C2.
Yeah, C2s. Yeah, some good judgments in there as well. It's good. It's good. I like working your way up through it and having the argument of yourself. The clients will think you're a schizophrenic.
I always do. You've got to start somewhere, but then you've got to kind of reassess
sit in your van, chat to your mate, ask him if you're going mad, and then after a few years,
Well,
your
again,
mates will go, "You're not mad."
You know, if you're on your own, I mean, Codebreaker's a good second voice. It's not your decision maker,
Indeed.
but it's an opinion.
Right, let's ramp this up a bit.
Yep.
Right, this was under a floor, joining a load of cables together, just loose, flapping about. That's actually after it's taken out. But take up the floorboard. That's what you find underneath.
Okay, so it's not readily accessible.
No.
But it's crap.
Yes.
Right.
It also
and there's signs of, the earthing arrangement is horrific.
Yeah.
There's signs of that chemical breakdown on the insulation because all that green goo. The neutral looks like it's burnt out.
Does look like it's not quite home in there, doesn't it?
It looks like it's just given up the ghost. That's definitely not on an RCD.
I don't know if did you actually test this, John, to see if there was, or was it just a
rewire? It was all just being ripped out regardless.
Oh, thank God.
Because technically, you know, it might still be electrically sound for our testing, which is why it's so important to inspect then test.
I go with electrical connections one on that. That's just not suitable sufficient. I'd also go with good workmanship materials 13411. It's just not good workmanship nor the correct use of materials. So to me, that's a C2. I wouldn't want to improve that. I'd want to rip it out and say that's potentially dangerous. You need to rip that out.
No, I agree.
What does everyone say?
We've got...
Look at the quotes. Fire waiting to happen. Yep.
There we go.
Jonathan, Jono's saying something the Caerphilly clown would do. Evidently a Welsh joke there. Yeah, C2s, C1s. Yeah, value in all of it. Value in all of it, to be honest with you. We could spend hours debating all these, and I think we'd all agree, actually, depending on different points of view, and come to more of a collect. But this is just a teaser type thing, that just to get the pencil sharpened, really. Okay, I'm going to go with a C2, but I don't disagree with the C1s out there as well. Next one, holy cow!
Yeah, this was a 2-bedroom flat consuming it. What exactly it was doing with all these circuits wasn't entirely clear.
How many different breakers are in there? Steeple, GE, ProTech.
This looks like whatever's cheapest when the work's needed.
Yeah.
Can I have a quick vent while everyone's coding this? I can't stand these really tall RCBOs. They're designed as retrofits, but they do not fit in bloody any boards made 20 years ago at all.
And some positions of boards, you just cannot get the neutrals in properly. No. And confidently. They just put them way beyond reach.
That's a perfect example of a board that just isn't a manufactured assembly. It's just not been considered as a holistic assembly at all.
No.
Too much copper showing on top of the terminals. Again, workmanship. The white fly leads, I'd be cutting them back. I'd be crimping them and putting them in their relevant terminals. Strain. Look at the strain on the main tails on the left. Bending radius of those conductors. Bending radius of the conductors on the tall RCBOs. Access and maintenance of the neutral bar is difficult. It's just a really poor workmanship.
Okay, so we've got lots of it could be improved.
Oh, sorry.
We've got lots of it could be improved, but is anything in here the smoking guns for potentially dangerous? C2.
I'm going to go with... I would work it to a C2 with the strain on the conductors, but I'd want to FI this.
Yeah. Those tails they look like there's a lot of strain in there. I'm not comfortable with those.
No. I'm not at all. At least the RCBOs are Type A. Well done, Steeple. They've been out for years, by the way. People research them. Type A RCBOs have been out for like 20 years. MK did them. My old house had RCBOs. I didn't even realise at the time what they were.
So, John, was this one of yours?
It was one I had the misfortune of going looking at, yes. This
I
was
bet you were singing at the end of the day.
Something that somebody was looking to purchase, the build or the flat. And I just literally went there just for a quick look to get a general idea of the state it was in, and this was one of the things which was found.
So, I mean, in this situation, what would you recommend? Would you recommend a new board to just more economically consolidate this mess to one manufacturer? Or
yeah, as a minimum. And this one was in an appalling place as well. It was actually under the stairs, or equivalent of under the stairs, literally on the floor, in sort of the literal triangle a bit. So it was really hard to get to as well. And there was a whole pile of other problems in this building with it. It it looked like it had been done fairly well to start with, and then over the years, someone's added a bit and someone else added something else, and this is the end result. So,
all alterations and additions, isn't it? At the end of the day, without taking into accountability the overall impact on the installation.
Yeah, looks like we've got a firm C2 here.
Yeah, I'm with that. Definitely C2s. Definitely agree with some C3s in there. Definitely agree with some FI as well. So it's good. Right, moving on. If I can. Oh, dear Lord.
Right.
This is a common one.
Yeah. Twin and earth outside, and this is supplying some outbuilding of some sort, and it's just hanging there in the air. And
was its condition good as you found it? Was it a
wasn't
bit brittle to touch, maybe?
bad. It was a bit green and grotty. So
the trouble is the regs do allow twin and earth, and that's the problem. This is one of the big debates that's happened repeatedly on social media with regards to twin and earth being clear. I've found installations where I've gone out to someone's shed and there is twin and earth, and you can, when you look at it in the sun, all you can see is splits and copper shining through. But the person has just been blissfully unaware, and yet the wiring regs allows it. And I would absolutely ban twin and earth being clipped outside a building without suitable UV and mechanical protection on it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. There's UV, obviously. Then we've got to think about things like the travel that conductors take under temperature. So if these conductors are going out and they're under little to no negligible demand, then you're not going to see much unless they're constantly being under UV light. But if you're going to then go to a shed that's got a wash machine or a tumble and you're going to constantly turn that on, then that changing of temperature could break down the insulation as well.
Yeah, this is one of the few things I completely disagree with the regs and also the IET forums where they've said, well, it is technically acceptable. Stop saying that rubbish. We have enough information as an industry to see that this cable breaks down and is a potential hazard. Just don't allow it. Make sure any sheathed cable is mechanically protected and protected against UV degradation. That's good selection direction. Why the regs even mention allowing this is mind-blowing.
It's just being anal with the fact that it might statistically fall within certain tolerances.
Well, it becomes the trouble is the regs is almost a set of instructions to guide the selector and erector, and as well with the inspector. But I would just say common sense: no mechanical protection, no support on terminations, no protection against UV or mold degradation. Will eventually cause a hazard and accident to homeowner. So I'd see to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What have we got?
We have got C2.
Great. Marvellous. We're going to move on.
2/3 of C2.
Right, I'm going to speed these up a wee bit.
Okay.
That photo's overlaid. That's a standard one, wooden back box. I think that's one of yours, John.
Yeah, it's wooden back box. The wiring is newer than the back box, so someone's put new wires in or new cables in because there is a CPC there. And but of course, this wooden box is the issue, and also you got your fixing screws straight into those little bits of timber on either side, so not a particularly reliable fixing. It's a light switch. People haven't obviously worked it out yet.
Yeah. So do we now say this is a risk of fire, combustibility, enclosures, or legacy?
Yeah, I mean it doesn't comply now because it's a flammable enclosure, but in the 1960s and earlier, this is what they were made of. Yeah. So.
I'm going to argue to toss it. To me, that's a C3 because that looks like it's embedded in a wall, which is non-combustible in itself. Yes, the material is combustible, but unless there is a risk of the available fire loading causing a mass detriment to the house, I would suggest it requires improvement for a metal back box that can utilise the earthing and receive the switch better.
I'll be fairly confident with that. There does appear to be a bit of copper peeking between that. Is that light shining through that tape? That reflection of light.
Probably a bit of
reflection.
Reflection.
Reflection of light.
Right. What have we got on this?
We've got mainly C3, a couple of C2s.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. There's nothing immediately dangerous here, and it's not really anything that's going to become dangerous. But
is it in a? It's in a brick and plaster wall, isn't it? So it's not going to spread a fire.
Yeah. No, the only thing you need to be careful of is that hole where the cable comes down. But relatively, the volume of material that could burn is very unlikely to produce a level of heat where you could actually get a transference which could heat another combustible surface to the point where it would catch fire, i.e. a joist above it. So I wouldn't put that as a C2, although Mr. Watts will tell me otherwise. Right, moving on. Jesus. We're nearly there, by the way.
Right, another Wilex consumer unit, fuse box, whatever. Someone's upgraded one of them, if you want to call it that, with that lovely 6 amp thing at the end. And then, of course, the main problem here is all of those cables spewing out the top.
Was all this boxed in and the boxing's been taken away?
No, that's actually how it was.
That's actually how it was.
It's in a cupboard. So you open the cupboard door. This is what you find.
Well, at least you've got slack to remake the board off.
Yeah. I mean, one of those cables isn't even in the board on the right-hand side there. It's just it's hanging down. So
hanging down.
I know you'd be looking at prescribed zones and stuff for cables coming down, but for me, that is desperate for some trunking. Is that the whole board for the whole installation?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So there's way too much attached to it.
Hang on, how many circuits are in it?
A lot.
Small, there's only 4 circuits.
12, right.
Yeah.
Right, that, yeah,
Magic.
okay. That's the C2 there, isn't there, really?
Yeah,
The division of installation, all sorts.
Yeah, we got C2
Wow.
here.
JW, you have come across some crap, says Dean Cafferty. Absolutely.
That's because he works majorly in the domestic, which we do often say the domestic is a very exciting area to work in.
Indeed, indeed. Right, okay. So the results in, yeah? C2?
Yeah,
Great.
C2.
Moving on.
All right, so we have a downlight here. A connection. We kind of
Another common one.
This might be coming from the joint box we had earlier on.
Yeah, I think we said it was a C2 there, wasn't it, really? Same principle, same issue. If we can agree that, I'll skip on this one.
I think we'll skip on. This will come up as a C2.
Yep. Now there's there's a nice one. Broken switch. C1.
Yeah. Live
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it just so that we can just check. Yeah, it's all C1s. C1s, 20, 30, yeah.
Fantastic. We're on agreement.
C1.
Direct access to live parts. And again, a good inspector. Hopefully, if he's got on his van some spare light switches, just make the problem go away.
Yeah,
Build it into pricing.
Yeah. But again, that's a good thing, though. You just said that. A good inspector hopefully should. Again, good inspectors should have some basic resources.
I'm not on the tools full time, and yet I've got enough gear in my house, in my shed to rewire 2 houses. Don't know why.
But if you were to audit an inspector who claims to be a good inspector, you probably go, well, let's look at what's in your wagon.
Yeah.
To see what you can do.
Accessories have you got to prevent rise of danger. Right, moving on. We're nearly there. Hooray. Now, John, Jesus, this is one of your ones, wasn't it?
No, this isn't one of mine.
No, I don't remember this one. Hang on. This is another one sent on Instagram. This is a board that's just been butchered and battered over the years with cables. As you can see the picture on the left, someone's running twin nerf rather than down the conduit, just chopped a hole in the top. You can see they've put a Garrow RCD with Hager stuff. They've got at least 3 cables in it. You look at the size of the main tails. It's just, to me, immediately screams out, there's no good workmanship materials. This was tested, inspected, and sent to me. It was just really bad workmanship materials all round, really. Mixture of manufacturers. It was a DIY job for anybody asks. And just
seems to be seeing a lot of multiple circuits into breakers these days.
Well, yeah, it saves the end user a fortune, isn't it, really? They don't get subdivision of installation. So I straight away looking at that, obviously it had a board cover on, by the way. So all you saw was a cable tie wrap to the top, but that to me was a C3 at first look. But the mixing and matching, the doubling up on the breakers, the 25 amp on them cables, I think they're 2.5s, C25s. Maybe push that towards C2.
Looks like the majority of guys have. We've got here.
Yeah.
35% C2.
Great. This is the last one. This is to tease the DNO one we're going to do. So this is a wonderful old DNO head. It's one of the old PILC, paper insulated lead wrapped conductors. You can see from it there's an earthing conductor coming out the bottom. There's actually 2 of them. One went down to a clamp on the lead sheath. The other one came out of the side of it. And that's what you've got. But if you look carefully at the circle, you can see an exposed conductor where somebody's obviously changed that neutral connection over the years. This is normally filled with pitch. As an insulating compound or an alleged insulating compound.
Yeah.
May I say that? I think I will. Hopefully we can show the video by then. But yes, so this is what would you code that? Now, obviously outside of the scope of 7671 is the DNO equipment, although Codebreakers does have codes for it because it's fundamental for protection of the overall electrical installation. There is a debate we're going to have on this during the intake one as to whether or not this actually is within the scope of 761, and it's one of the debates I'm currently having with the IET. Because I genuinely believe that the DNO intakes are fundamentally inside the scope of 761, but I'm going to leave it there to tease. You have to watch the DNO intakes webinar to understand why.
Yeah.
But what would you code that?
Well, I mean, the regulations in my head immediately go, oh, you know, there's no safety electrical connection do not remove label on the external MET.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a C3 there. But then I look at the rest. And then I start to question how much I need to know about DNO intakes if I'm going to start taking accountability and responsibility for my observations, which goes on to our DNO presentation that we're going to do in a few weeks.
We are, yeah.
Because we've got a lot of questions to ask on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please tune into that one. That's going to be a mind blower. So I'm going to go C1 just because that's under a staircase, small child scenario.
Mm-hmm.
It may not meet the IP finger test.
What's the risk? For those who may not know, what is the risk here?
It's the live part within the circle where the neutral connection is.
Okay, so reaching of the live parts.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, I'm going at C1. I can see a lot of people say it's a C2 because it's again, it depends on your assessment of risk of accessibility. Could you maybe put some sort of shielding around that? Is that a matter of opening up them screws, undoing the neutral terminal and lowering it down, which we're not authorized to do, which is one of the nuisance things, which again, I think DNO training should be in electricians training. I do. I think training on that equipment should be part and parcel of our ongoing CPD. I think
it's definitely exposure to a live conductor. You can't ignore that. And if you say it as simply as that, then you're going to have to go, well, that must be a C2 at least.
So what is the...
maybe a C1.
What has the survey said?
We're hovering around C1s and C2s.
Paul, you must know a lot of small children looking for electrical equipment. No, but I have read lots of reports of people dying and fires occurring. So, and hopefully we'll be able to show them to you very soon, because there is a lot of information in our industry that our industry does not tell us. Is that fair to say, Dave?
There's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on for years. We are
slowly
discovering, and we're basically kind of, we're learning more every day.
Mm-hmm. And that's seriously not a lie as well. That's just not right. Okay, so we'll C1 that. Have we run the poll? Is everybody saying it's a C1?
Yeah, we got majority of C1, 59% C1, 30% C2 on that one.
Again, I wouldn't disagree with a C1 or a C2, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
definitely, there's potential danger there, and something needs to be done. For me, I wouldn't argue with a C2 and a phone call to the DNO as I would a C1 and a phone call to the DNO. Now, this is the very last one because it's just to kind of get people thinking a bit. We've done lots of inspections. This was sent to me by the chap who took it, and this was 247 volts between the kitchen sink and a Bosch tumble dryer. Again, this is more of a safety message.
It's scenarios like this where we start to see voltages we don't expect to see them, or we have people experiencing sensations on washing machines where we really need to understand our lack of understanding on earthing and bonding separately to earthing. And if you have these scenarios and you can't properly fault find or diagnose these problems, then you need to kind of speak up and let us know so that we can look at getting some understanding on earthing and bonding improved. So what do we see here? We've got one probe on a tap, which is providing a 0 volt reference of earth, correct?
Yes. Via, it's basically a fortuitous path via the copper pipes that feed the kitchen. And it turned out that the investigation was the builder who did the kitchen had chopped through a conduit. The old conduit in the building was the CPC, because a lot of old buried conduits did act as CPCs. He had obviously done a repair and reinstated it, but hadn't reattached the earth. So there was obviously a fault in the machine somewhere. And when he put his direct contact probe across the two, he was able to get 247 volts. Now, interestingly, again, another tease really is there is now more noise in the DNOs about using voltage contact testers on fixed equipment, even on DNO heads now because of tracking across the heads, but we'll cover that in another webinar. So Just be mindful. It's literally a safety message. Be mindful, careful what you're touching, and listen to the user of the installation and the concerns that they have. I think that's fair to say. It might even be worthwhile asking anything you get any tingles off, any equipment performing as it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And going
I
around
do
and
remember
doing those checks.
getting tingles. If you get someone saying, I'm getting tingles, okay, sometimes that's because they're not touching a very good 0-volt reference, but they're actually touching mains voltage.
Yeah.
I did. I work with a building insurance company, and I was asked to go to Bagshot and investigate a shower fault. And the guy doing it was a flood. It was a water tank fell through the ceiling, and they were just doing all the final work on restoring the bathroom. But they changed a plastic handrail in the shower to metal. And what had happened is years before they moved the switch in the wall to the left by 2 or 3 inches, and they actually put a connector block in the wall, and they crushed the cable connector block when they filled the plaster work in. This was years prior. It was only when the restoration work was done that they changed this handrail from plastic to metal. So they basically created an electrode in the wall. And now they were getting a shock. But beforehand, the voltage there was negligible, but now there was a 0-volt reference, the voltage was huge. So if you see people getting little shocks, little touches, don't touch an earth and then try it, for crying out loud. Because that's a bad idea.
Right. Okay. So this is just a final slide to remind you what the codes are. We'll stick this on YouTube. Lastly, I want to go back to the beginning very quickly.
Right. Before you close, if you've there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. If any of you guys have a question that hasn't been answered in chat, then throw it in there, and we'll try and get through 5 or 6 before we
fly through this. So this is the 4 stages of competence. I love it. It's a great visual diagram. 4 stages of competence. There's unconscious incompetence. Now, I suffer from every one of these. Unconscious incompetence. You don't know that you don't know how to do something. Well, that's me when I go and talk to someone in the industry from a different sector. I am unconsciously incompetent. Then I become consciously incompetent, okay, and that's where you know that you don't know how to do something and it bothers you. That's the journey that a lot of learners and trainees are currently on. They're consciously incompetent. Then you emerge from that and you go into a conscious competence. You know how to do something, and it takes great effort. Writing this webinar, I finished 10 minutes before we started it, and that's true. It took me days to write these, probably about 5-6 days in total. Unconscious competence is where you know how to do something and it's second nature. You rocket it. Guys who are doing EICRs every single day get better and better by the week because they use reference material like code breakers, like the wiring regulations, like the electrical safety first guidance notes to practice developing their knowledge from a document and questioning things. So that's a good little slide there.
Just to add to that, they do it, they repeat, but then they can actually then become unconsciously incompetent because they may come across new technology.
Yes, absolutely.
In the workplace that wasn't there before, but they didn't know.
I genuinely believe.
Cycle.
I genuinely believe at one point in my life I was unconsciously competent at EICRs when I was doing it regularly, and the more further I went away from doing them, I became consciously competent because it takes effort. But now when stuff like Type A RCDs and arc fault detection, I started off as unconsciously incompetent, went straight to consciously incompetent because it bothered me, and that's fine. There is no wrong part to be in. It's trying to push yourself into the unconsciously competent. Just you're really good at doing stuff. I think it's just a great mirror you can hold up to yourself.
This is a cycle that works in all areas. It works in regulations. It's something that we kind of do. We're always assessing what we don't know, and then we look for things to find more information. This is why Paul's mentioned, earthing and DNO systems. We found some things out, and then we looked to develop to conscious competence, but then we found more.
I can't even begin to tell you. There is at least 3 or 4 major industry bombshells that we are currently investigating at the moment, and we are literally learning this stuff from scratch. But the good thing is we are taking our time to learn this from scratch. But yeah. So awesome. Other than that, we're going to do commercial next time. We may throw some pictures in that even just there's no codes, because I think that would be quite good to see some stuff with no codes in it. If you can let us know via feedback whether on the next one we repeat the bit at the start, because depending on who the audience is, or you want us to go straight into the coding, that would be really cool. We have coming up next Wednesday, commercial, the Wednesday after that, industrial. We're then going to go and do, I think we're doing one on surge protection devices. We're going to do one on fire alarms. which Dan is going to do, and that's going to be very controversial.
And
we're going to come up with a new coding system for fire alarms, working from the standard, not to the standard. And we're also going to do DNO intakes, where we're hopefully going to be able to talk to you about diverted neutral currents and show you some stuff that will blow your mind. And yeah.
All right. So I'm going to jump into the questions so that we can make sure we've had a go at each question. Started off, you remember, back at 7 o'clock or 7:07. Steve says, socket faceplate CPC is connected to a metal back box only, but will be earthed if you put the faceplate back, with the screw. So if your method of earthing the socket faceplate is via the screw and the connection is to the box only, so you haven't put an earth into the accessory, is that codable in your view?
Yeah, I'm saying C2 for that, because you're literally relying on the screw for the connection to the socket,
which is very much subject to rust and corrosion.
I was immediately the minute you start that sentence, I thought C3, but then C3. But then when you then consider external influences, vibration, loosening, DIY...
There's a reason that connection is supposed to be in the accessory where it's mechanically designed, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, you can take it from there back to the back box, but not the other way around, I think.
I'll agree with JW, actually, RC2 that.
Another one from Steve. If you see a C2 on the DNO side, can you still call the EICR satisfactory? So if it's like... outside.
NIC told me you can't make a note of it and you can't code DNO side. Well, then tell the NIC to put it in writing and be prepared to stand next to you in the dock when the judge is questioning you, because ignorance isn't the defence. And that jar, that boils my... Oh, that's so annoying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's just... No. If it's a C2, it's a failure, period. Issue a danger notification, ring the DNO, discharge your duty of care, tell them that someone's going to get hurt, put it in writing. The NIC guy on the end of a phone, I'm sorry, he's not there. He's not the inspector. He doesn't have the duty of care under all the various legislation on him. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So, no.
All right.
Sorry, NIC. I'll have a word with John O'Neill when I next see him about that.
All right. The last one from Steve at the beginning. Isn't FI meaning you've reported the fault? FI is for investigating the cause. I don't quite understand what he's saying. Isn't FI meaning you reported the fault? FI is for investigating the cause. So further investigation is... I don't quite understand
I'm sorry, I'm struggling to understand the...
You see that question? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe what he's saying is, okay, doesn't FI mean a fault has been found and the FI is to investigate the cause of the fault?
Well, further investigation means further investigation required without delay.
Yeah, because further investigation could actually be that you're...
So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
It's you reporting that you need to carry out more This is why I call it the time code. This is one where I need... This is you saying to the customer, I need more time. By the way, as I'm investigating, I'm finding things that are wrong. You wouldn't say further investigation to investigate how beautiful and lovely it is.
It could be, for example, let's say you've done sampling and you said, oh, I'm going to sample one of those 12 luminaires, but the one I've sampled is absolute dog shit. But I've not got it in the arranged contract or the dismantling. I've not got authorization from the client to dismantle the others, to lower the others. But I might not be satisfied that that one luminaire was enough, and I want to look at more. So I've not found a fault. I want to look at more of the installation to see if there is more of that.
Dave,
so if I can be used for that.
David Betteridge has said, please let me answer this one. The never-ending debate between codebreaker versus best practice guide with walls less than 50 mil. C2 codebreakers, C3 best practice guide, my opinion. C2, your opinions. I've noticed a few in here that may have had their hand in the codebreaker. Yes, funny enough. We did write certain parts of it. I'm just gonna be very clear here and say it's a C3. It's not a C2. And the reason why it doesn't line up with electrical, am I allowed to say it? I'll say it anyway. The reason why it doesn't line up with the electrical safety first best practice guide is because individuals within the organization of NAPIT wanted a different code. I don't necessarily agree with that. So again, I'm not using Codebreaker as my minimum benchmark. I'm working from it. And if I disagree with it, I'm fine, because my perception of risk, my ability to tell a judge why, if it's in prescribed zones, etc. Remember, 20 years ago, we weren't mandating RCDs. So we had EBADOS, we had the necessary selection and erection and mechanical protection and lots of other things we need to be able to justify. So there you go. There's the real reason behind that.
Okay, he's got another one. Maybe not a coding issue, but a testing one on the calculation of ZS using ZE impedance in R1, R2. The no parallel paths taken into the measurement, higher fault current possibility. I personally still think a full ZS impedance test, but electricity at wet regs doesn't like this method. So that, you know, we shouldn't do live ZS testing because electricity at wet regs doesn't want us to do live work if we don't need to do live work. And a lot of people are calculating it. The whole argument of ZS testing and parallels and measurement and non-compliance with electricity at wet regulations and stuff. Yeah. I've voiced my opinion to say that you should test as much as you can test in electricity at wet regulations.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I was going to say live working. Yes, live working should be reduced so far as is reasonably practicable. And my statement to every electrician I've ever worked with is the only times when live working is acceptable is when you are proving, when you're doing proving live for safe isolation and undertaking live testing to prove disconnection and the fault path of a breaker. You have suitable control measures in your competence, your knowledge, your tools, your equipment, your checks, your safe working method. I am meeting more and more people that are just saying calculate. I was raised, and forgive me for saying this out loud, but I was raised of the school that you would be shot if you calculated stuff. But the industry seems to be pushing more and more easy ways to get people out the door quicker. Yeah, if I can't do it, I would rather limit and put it in my extent and limitations rather than calculate it, to be perfectly frank. Mm-hmm. The calculation should validate your testing.
Yeah, the problem with calculating it is that you're adding two different things together. Impedance and resistance are not the same.
They're not the same, no. They are not the same indeed.
That's exactly how Mr. Skirm answers that scenario.
Don't get me started on this.
So yeah, we challenged the whole calculation as not a good thing. Daniel would like clarification on the 433.3.1.2, which is the emission of overload protected devices for the characteristics of the load if it's not likely to carry an overload current. Resistive loads are given here, so resistive loads are considered not to need overload protection. But what if the equipment has capacitive components, inductive components, electronic components? Does that mean it now can? Does that mean it now could overload?
Well, it might. It depends on the device. If you've got, say, a cooker, traditionally a cooker can't overload because it's all resistive elements. But if it's a fan oven, it's got a motor in it, and motors can overload depending on what type of thing they are. And electronic stuff, it depends how it's going to fail. Bits of it might fail short circuit, not a problem. It's not impossible for electronic stuff to overload things. So yeah, it's really considering what type of load you've actually got, including all the components that might be within it. So say like an oven with a fan in, it's not necessarily your fixed resistive load anymore.
No, I mean, many loads could obviously have impedances, but as you say, if it's got a motor that can overwork and overload, or sockets that you can plug in too much and overload, then fine. So yeah, I think maybe resistive loading is probably the wrong term to use now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think most stuff has electronics and other kind of stuff in it now. The
doesn't mean it'll overload, does it?
Yeah, the pure resistive heater isn't something you're going to come across much these days.
No. Okay, Renee. If this installation no have RCD protection, what do we do with supplementary bonding? Okay, let's rephrase this. So there's an installation that has no RCD protection. Do we go on to look at supplementary bonding, or do we recommend supplementary bonding or recommend RCD protection?
Well, if it's a bathroom,
assuming bathrooms here.
Yeah, if it's a bathroom and there's no RCD, then yes, it will need supplementary bonding. So
yeah,
and
if it has it, it'd have to have adequate supplementary bonding to the requirements.
Well, we used to supplementary bond every damn thing together now. Now it's supplementary bonding just pretty much exists.
Do you remember cage bonding in bathrooms? Remember that?
Yeah.
And the thing is that just because you've got an RCD for a bathroom doesn't automatically mean you don't need a supplementary bonding, because you might still need it depending on what things you've got in the bathroom. So presence of RCD is not some green tick to not do anything else. It's just part of the thing.
One of many things. It's one of the requirements of the other parts. Yeah. What's our opinion on rodent damaged cables buried in loft insulation under boarding in very full lofts? Twin earth conductors exposed, found during a lighting job, and just couldn't leave it there in good consciousness. Yeah. If it's got
Well done,
rodents,
that
I
man,
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
That's the
you're
trouble.
gonna, yeah. So you can't leave it there. You're gonna seek to remedy that, but obviously don't replace like for like, unless you obviously try to remove the fauna,
Yeah,
the
this is
rodent
what you
trouble.
see in thatched cottages and places, a lot of which there's a lot in Dorset here. In that sort of situation, twin earth is not an acceptable use. It's basically steel conduit, because if you've got rats once, they're going to be coming back, regardless of whether the house owner says, "Oh, I don't have rats in my house," but the fact is they're there, so they're going to come back. So
Didn't we used to wire like in thatched cottages? Didn't we used to use pyro years ago?
yes,
I remember it all used to be in pyro. You couldn't wire a thatched cottage unless it was in mineral insulated pyro. Is that not still a thing?
you can still do it if you want to pay the money, but it normally ends up as steel conduit because it's cheaper.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
All right.
It's particularly cheap anyway, but it's cheaper than the other options.
Where are we standing with properties where the main water pipe is plastic and there's no RCD protection and no supplementary bonding? Okay, so where are we standing if properties, if the main water pipe is plastic and there's no RCD protection and no supplementary? Well, there's a number of things there, really. The RCD
damn thorough inspection, a damn lot of testing.
Yeah.
A damn lot of recommendations for improvements, a lot of C3s, a lot of C2s, bringing the installation back into some form of compliance. Again, as I said to you before, I think we're going to go back to EBADOS. To be honest with you, you don't know whether you've got fortuitous paths on your earthing.
Yeah. I mean, Matt, just strengthen this EBADOS argument. I mean, we've already done talks on prosumer foundation earth electrodes, and we're seeing with our work on DNOs that there's going to be an aggressive push for more earthing bonding. So I agree.
Yeah. Sorry if we're saying stuff that maybe doesn't agree with the current status quo, but we're spending too much of our time researching standards that have not been integrated into 7671. So we can see where this is going, and some of it is kind of backwards a bit, but it's
for a reason.
Technology and supplies are.
50 watt halogen downlights that have open back with no fire hood. What code would you give? So Mark's got this one. There's no fire hood.
It's a great one, Mark.
Downlights, no fire hood.
So if I remember rightly, this was a C3, depending on where it was. So if it was in like a house, it would be a C3. But if it was in a flat where you were below another property, it would be a C2.
Space above.
Yes.
Because this is where when we
have a common debate. It's a good one, though.
It's about if there's a habitable space above, then that increases the level of risk.
These could be a C2 as well, depending on what's in the void above. Because if it's poking into a loft and that loft's full of dust and dirt and mess and stuff which could be flammable, you don't want to be heating up to a high temperature and setting the loft on fire. So it could be a C2, depending on what's above it. So
cool.
Indeed.
Okay. Would you code a floating wago for neutrals and a light switch? So obviously we've got live conductors connected with no mechanical retention. Yeah.
I think.
My view on Hagen then make light switches with neutral terminals.
Yeah. So if you have a light switch with a neutral in it, great, use it because it's been designed specific for that use. I've always been of the view that back boxes and light switches and dimmers were never designed to take reams and reams of neutrals, never mind ones that are coiled up in the back, which is why I don't use two-plate wiring, and I know electronic dimmers require them, but I would go with a 47mm deep back box. I would also wonder why the manufacturers of back boxes are not actually having some sort of clamp in the back boxes to allow the wagos to fit in. Maybe there's an innovation there that we need to ask someone to design.
To be fair, I mean we've had a lot of innovations in switchgear and in accessories. We've not had any innovation in our back boxes.
No, and they should be. We need to update them massively to be able to retain cables in the back for this purpose. And if I saw that, that'd be great. But if anyone wants to go and design it, copyright E5, just give money to charity and we'll be laughing.
Yeah. But live conductors. I mean, if you look at is it 5377? Is that the maintenance-free one? I can't remember. The maintenance-free regulation requires live conductors to be free from mechanical strain, and you can flip that in your inspection. Say, well, if it's not fixed, then it's subject to mechanical strain in the switching operation. So yeah, that is technically could be improved. Doesn't mean it's potentially dangerous. I mean, look at the load. What loading are you talking about here? So I don't know if it's potentially dangerous though.
Yeah, again, connected just the suitability of terminations and it's just Bending radius on the cables. Nobody ever talks about that. Bend and twist stuff together in a light switch. And
That's because nobody wants to bend cables properly anymore.
Yeah, I know. Right, come on, last few, and let's let everyone go.
How do you think we can improve on the EICR model with extent limitations being affected more by cost than need? Well, good old Sean asked a question that we can just answer in a sentence.
Okay, great one. So I would print out the copies of the risk guide. I would print out the ethical principles guide. I would issue that to every single client in every pack that you do, so that they can stop moaning at you and say you receive guidance from the Engineering Council of the UK, as well as that wonderful little badge you wear on your arm or your T-shirt. I think the extent limitation is something the industry desperately needs work on, because your clients will be incompetent. So you need to figure out how much time you've got and very clearly map out exactly your extent limitation, so that you are covered. And if you are called back, and you can at least say the customer has understood that. And that's something that EICRs should probably do. The person ordering the work should probably sign a document to say they understand the extent limitations and they've been explained to them better. So that may be something that we could ask them to improve on the certificates. I don't know.
The problem with all of that is that requires people to be motivated to do better, motivated to improve. And unless bodies are going to make money from that, they're not going to put the work in to do that. So the only other way that it could be done is if you had a licensing scheme introduced with licensed inspectors, and the company actually properly sanctioned and monitored it through a piece of software. Which is that could be set up within a month.
And Mr. Doyle has got a cracking one. Thank you, Sean, for that. No RCD on circuits, however, supplementary bonding in place. Flat on the third floor in a building. Would you code? For me, and this is taking me back now 20 years, this was never an issue in flats. It was and the only argument was, well, you could stick an extension lead out your window, etc., etc. For me, this was a C3, and I think if I was there, if somebody explained that to me now, I'd say it's a C3. However, again, as an inspector, I would want to go and look at the use of the installation, ask them questions on what they use the installation for. Do they have a car? Is it liable that they could have a 30-meter extension lead they'd drop out to plug in a power washer? Or do you know what I mean? So again, it's understanding use, but that's my one. What's your views, guys?
Well, I'll say that, yeah, just look, if you're going around their flat, look in the cupboard and see if there's a 50-meter extension reel in there, because if there is, you know what it's going to be used for. In terms of would you code, well, there's going to be some codes, because obviously no RCD at all. It's going to be a load of things like your bathrooms and the cables in the walls and all that other stuff anyway. So there's going to be plenty of C3s anyway. Whether you put it C2 for the socket to use outside, well, third floor, it's certainly possible to sling the extension lead out the window.
Of course it is.
If it's on 20th floor, probably not.
No.
But again, it all depends on the circumstances. But there's going to be some.
Again, that's important, isn't it? It's so important to look at the circumstances. To look at
it's a great question, Mark, though.
behaviours.
It's a great question. Next great question is why one of my lightsabers not working. It's because the battery's dead. So there you go. And they're awesome.
Last one here from Stuart. The AM2 exam was acceptable to leave floating neutral in the Wago in the back box, and I can explain why that is. It's because they gave you the wrong accessory. I have been talking to Net about this whole thing. A lot of their guidance is not correct, including their isolation procedure guidance. You should not be putting neutrals in floating connections that don't have mechanical strain retention.
Oh,
just because they're the AM2, they're managed by Net. The assessors and the centers may be getting it wrong, and they are.
Shocking.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. That is it. Right. So. Thanks, for
just on the feedback. Yeah. We won't do the pre-start stuff on the commercial. We'll jump straight into it, and we'll just ask people to watch this one.
Yeah, well, we'll upload this straight away anyway. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming in. Anything else you guys want to say other than can we go?
Thanks, lads. I've loved it.
So next week's going to be 7 o'clock again, commercial.
And if anyone watching wants to send some pictures in of any really cracking commercial stuff, send it in info@e5group.org.uk or just on Instagram or Twitter, and I'll filter it and just make sure we've got the best pictures possible to make it more engaging. So thank you for watching, though. Okay.
Sid, any last words, John?
No, I think we've covered it in extensive detail, and that's 3 hours and a bit of
You're
time
joking. Is this been 3 hours?
Yeah. So yes.
And there's still people in here.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he's
Hey, at
learning.
least we're giving you it. Yeah, this is like a live podcast.
We can guarantee that they won't be as long next because all right.
Yeah, and just also, we do this regularly even without putting it on live webinars. So this is nothing.
Yeah. You've basically just had a
Peek in
behind
our
the scenes
normal
view
Friday
of
nights.
our normal evenings. Right, guys. Peace and love. Anything else we can help you with? Message us. Otherwise, we'll see you guys Wednesday. Commercial.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.